Welcome to the fantasy audiobook. I'm in the sea, sign in breathing on the opening day at the beginning. Chapter 21. There was a jingle. The door of the tavern was pushed open. The tavern guy who was dozing off behind the counter woke up instantly. Welcome. Ah, Sister Makino. He saw the young woman walking into the tavern, an agitated spirit, standing up instantly without sleep. Wearing a turban and dark green hair, Makino looked at the store, and couldn't help but twitch at the corner of his eyes. She couldn't help holding her forehead with her hand, and said helplessly. I just went out for a day, what happened? The guy in the tavern standing upright couldn't help swallowing. After listening to him in detail about what happened last night, Makino was also a little shocked and couldn't help but look at the table where Ron and Kuina were. Those two kids, how many of them defeated Bald Root? Yeah, I thought everyone in the tavern was silly at the time. Especially that boy. You dare to believe that with his small body, he knocked the Bald Root out with a punch? The tavern guy said with an exaggerated expression. After all, Makino is someone who knows Shanks and has seen the strong. After being surprised, he quickly calmed down. She akimbo, looking at the fainting Bald Root group on the wall on the ground, she said, anyway, it's their hands first. Kimmy, tie them up, all the losses in this store are remembered. To them. Now, understand, the tavern guy KMI went to do it at once. Makino walked to Ron's table and put the gold coins collected last night on the table. Ron looked up at her. What is this? Makino looked at him and smiled. If you just don't have a place to go, you won't be able to spend so much money if you stay in the tavern overnight. Please take back the money. Juice and food are treated as gifts for the young guests in our tavern. I will also let them compensate for the damaged tables, chairs and walls. You don't have to remember it, after all, it's not your fault. Makino smiled gently at Ron. If I guess right, it should be your first visit to Windmill Town. Ron nodded. Really? Makino smiled and curled his eyes, looking very gentle and friendly, like a big sister next door. Sure enough, he is a gentle and cheerful person. Ron thought to himself, I'm the proprietress of this tavern. Makino, what's your name? Ron, she is Kuina. Ron, Kuina. Makino looked at Ron and nodded slightly and smiled. I also know 3 kids who are similar to you, but they are much more naughty than you. They play crazy outside all day, and it's awful to take care of them. Ron's heart moved. This should be Wong Luffy, Ace Sabo and the 3 of them. Did you come to Windmill Town alone, or did you come with an adult? What did you come from? Is there a place to live here? Makino asked curiously. After all, 2 children about 10 years old spent the night in the tavern, which really made her feel uneasy. Even if these 2 children are very strong. She and I came to this island alone, with no purpose, just to travel around and see the outside world. The place to live has not yet been determined. Ron replied. Huh, did the 2 go out to sea alone to this island? Makino was really shocked. At first she thought the 2 were from other towns, but she didn't expect them to come from overseas. Are kids so bold nowadays? Kuina, who was opposite Ron, woke up leisurely, raised her head and rubbed her eyes. After touching the fur on her back, she was startled. What is this? Just as she was wondering, she suddenly heard the voice of a gentle young woman on the other side. Since I can't find a place to live, or just live with me. There are still a few vacant houses on the 2nd floor of the tavern. Kuina was sober instantly. Ron heard Makino's words. Before he had time to think about it, Kuina on the other side suddenly raised his head and looked at Makino, with a hint of caution in his eyes, a bit like a little wild cat protecting food. Kuina, you are awake. Ron looked at her and said, this is Makino, the proprietress of the tavern. She said she can provide us with a place to live. What do you think? When Kuina heard what he said, she realized that she seemed to be wrong. She hurriedly looked away, lowered her head with shame. Yes, yes, Makino also reacted at this time, and she looked at Kuina, who was lowering her head, with a faint smile. I see. Ron didn't notice it. After seeing Kuina's consent, he looked at Makino and said, then it will be troublesome. Ever since. From this day on, Ron and Kuina temporarily lived in this tavern. Makino has a gentle and cheerful personality, is kind and friendly, and cares about people very much. After staying in the tavern for 2 days, Kuina became good friends with her and kindly called her sister Makino. Soon, 3 or 4 days passed. This day, Makino, let's play. A childish and cheerful voice came from the door. A short-sleeved black-haired boy with a straw hat and short sleeves stood at the entrance of the tavern, with gauze on his face and arms. Then 2 small figures emerged from behind him. There is a small ace of Madara on both cheeks. And Sabo, who wears a top hat with a windshield on his head, short blonde hair, and a tooth missing from his mouth. Luffy, Ace, Sabo. Makino was surprised to see the 3 of them. Yo, Makino, long time no see. Ace raised his hand and greeted Makino with a smile. Hello, you. Sabo is very polite. Why are you here today? Does the injury do not matter anymore? Makino stood behind the counter, holding his cheek in his hand, looking at the 3 with a smile on his face. It doesn't matter. It doesn't hurt at all, hee. Little Luffy, who is only 7 years old now, grinned at her, even showing teeth. Sure enough, it's a child, so the serious injury will be healed so soon. Makino looked at him and smiled gently. When she ran to Dayton's bandit house that night and saw the 3 of them, the 3 little guys were seriously injured, especially Luffy. At that time, she saw his appearance, but she was shocked, and she couldn't help but shed a lot of tears. But don't use too much force. Makino warned little Luffy. I see. Luffy is still innocent and cute now. Dan, let us tell you that we are all right now, don't worry. Ace said to Makino. Now it's over. He grinned at Luffy and Sabo beside him, then let's go. Oh, Luffy said joyfully. Ha ha ha. Sabo also laughed and ran out with the 2 of them. Be careful on the way. Makino looked at the 3 of them and exclaimed, with a look of helplessness and pampering in his eyes. Then she couldn't help but think of the black-haired boy. Next year will be about the same size as them, why is there such a big difference? On the way, where are we going to play today? Luffy looked at Ace and asked. Ace held the back of his head with both hands. Well, I'm not sure that the terminal is all burned down, I should go to the mountain to play as expected. Go catch the unicorn. Luffy's eyes were shining, and his face was looking forward to it. Sabo listened to their conversation with a smile. Suddenly, he saw a black-haired boy and a girl with short blue hair in front of him walking towards this side. After seeing the faces of the 2, Sabo's eyes widened slightly. He is Ron, who was returning from shopping with Kuina for help, raised his head and saw Sabo looking at him in surprise, as well as Ace and Luffy next to him. It is you. Ron was a little surprised. He didn't expect to meet the 3 of them here. Sabo, who is this guy? Is it someone you know? Luffy pointed to Ron and asked curiously about Sabo. He is the benefactor I said, and he helped me escape the city, so I can find you at that time. Sabo looked at Ron excitedly and said. Hearing this, Ace's eyes looked at Ron suddenly changed. He stepped forward and bowed his head to Ron seriously and said. My name is Ace. I am the brother of the 2 of them. Thank you for helping Sabo. Although you may not know what happened, your help to him saved us 3 lives. I will remember this kindness, living. Luffy, thank you too. He grabbed little Luffy's head. Thank you. Little Luffy rushed to Ron obediently. You are welcome. Ron accepted their gratitude, then he looked at Sabo and said. Have you decided not to go back to that home? When Sabo heard this, his smiling face suddenly froze. He lowered his head. I haven't figured it out yet. Ron didn't say much, watching him enter Makino's tavern with the short blue-haired girl who carried the word Kazuichi on his back. Ace couldn't help asking Sabo, are you sure that the benefactor who defeated several noble guards in the moment you mentioned was really him? It can't be wrong. Sabo nodded. But he obviously looks about the same age as me, how can he defeat several adult noble guards in an instant? Ace is still unbelievable, little Luffy said to him while digging his nose. I think he is much taller than you. Shut up, Luffy. Sabo turned to look at the tavern and said, Ron may indeed be about the same size as us, but he is definitely better than us. I'm pretty sure about that. It's really that amazing. Ace pinched his chin, thought about it, and his eyes lit up. Then, let's ask him to teach us how to become stronger. Inside Makino's tavern, may I teach you to become stronger? Ron, who was sitting at the table, looked at the 3 brothers who bowed to him in front of him, a little surprised. The three nodded together. Ron, you're very strong, right? We heard that you knocked the bald route into the air with one punch, and we want to be like you. Ace said. Sabo and Luffy looked at him with their eyes wide open, also looking forward to them. Ron took a sip of the juice and said unhurriedly, I can't help you become stronger directly. The three brothers were disappointed. But for the sake of Makino's face, I can let you exercise with me. The three brothers became excited again in an instant. Can you become stronger by exercising with Ron? Sabo said excitedly. At least it can be better than you are now. But my exercise is very hard. Are you sure you want to join me? The three brothers looked at each other and grinned. Sure. After experiencing the fire, the three of them realized their weaknesses and really wanted to become stronger. Okay. At 5 o'clock tomorrow morning, we will gather at the foot of Gorbo Mountain. 5 o'clock. Luffy was taken aback. Ace and Sabo looked at each other and nodded firmly at Ron. Understood. Early the next morning, around 5 o'clock, it was still dark. Ace and Sabo left the bandit house with the dozing Luffy, and came to the foot of the mountain agreed with Ron. When they arrived, Ron and Kuina had just finished a match, and they were surrounded by big trees that had been cut off. Let's start, then. Ron with Reikiri on his back looked at the three of them. The first exercise is to run from the foot of the mountain to the top of the mountain, back and forth 3 times. 3 times. Sabo and Ace opened their mouths wide. This is the most basic physical training. If you can't reach it, you can't get stronger. Ron and Kuina ran towards the top of the mountain after speaking. Ace and Sabo looked at each other. What's wrong? I can only run away. They nodded. Immediately he dragged the sleepy Luffy and hurried to catch up. Before they ran, the two were out of breath. Ron and Kuina have disappeared from sight for a long time. That won't work, you have to get Luffy up, or you won't be able to finish even 1 trip, let alone 3 trips. Ace said. Sabo also nodded breathlessly, and shouted to Luffy who was leaning on him, Luffy, Luffy, get up. You are useless, you can't call Luffy, let me do it. Ace said, approaching Luffy's ear and shouting loudly, Luffy, Grandpa is here. Grandfather. Luffy woke up suddenly. Where is Grandpa? Huh, where am I? Still asleep, don't you remember what we said to Ron yesterday? Ace hit him on the head with a punch. By the way, I have to work out with Ron today. Luffy touched his head, only then came to his senses. It's good to know, run quickly by yourself, it's really exhausting to take you with you. By the time the three brothers ran to the top of the mountain, it was already 30 days old. So hungry. Luffy lay on the ground, slumped to the ground, gasping for breath with his tongue out. I really want to eat meat. Ace and Sabo were also breathless and dry. You are too slow, I'm almost falling asleep waiting. Ron jumped from a tree, walked to the three of them, and kicked. Luffy said, don't lie down. The next exercise should be your favorite exercise. If you win, you can eat meat. Meat. Luffy's eyes lit up and he got up instantly. Where is the meat? Ron smiled at the three of them, you three come together. If you hit me, there will be meat. Whatever you say. Ace grinned with a punch palm. Luffy's eyes flashed. Sabo helped his hat. Superior. The result is until noon. The three of them still failed to hit Ron. Looking at the three brothers who were lying on the ground with their tongues out and gasping, Ron said, that's it for today, and then left. On the way back to the pub, Kuina looked at the smiling Ron and asked curiously. You seem to be enjoying it. Is there anything special about the three of them? Although the three of them are weak now, they will definitely be strong in the future. How do you know? Feel. Ron smiled. The next few days, they were all in similar situations. The three followed Ron to do a huge amount of physical training, and then 1-on-3 actual combat, and the result was the same. You can't even touch Ron's clothes. But the three of them were able to persevere, and Kuina's perseverance to become stronger still made Kuina look slightly. In the tavern behind the house one day, Kuina and Makino were behind the counter learning to mix. 4 boys of the same age were sitting around a table not far away. Hey, Luffy, this is my meat. Ace grabbed Luffy's face in annoyance, and pulled it to the sides. Spit it out to me. No, whatever gets into my mouth is mine. No matter how long he pulled his face as a rubber man, Luffy would never let go, his mouth bulged and he continued to chew like a hamster. You guy. Ron, is this a real knife on you? Sabo looked at Reikiri, who Ron had put aside curiously. Of course. Awesome. Can I see it? Sabo's eyes glowed and his face was full of admiration. Yes, you can, but be careful, this knife is very sharp. Ron smiled at him with a beer glass and a fruit beer, and then handed him Reikiri. Sabo reached out and took it with respect and reverence. It's so heavy, is this a real sword? Ron, do you usually carry such heavy things? Is it heavy? I don't think it is heavy. Quote. As expected of you. Can I pull it out and have a look? Yes, just be careful not to cut to yourself. Ron nodded. The next second he punched Luffy, who stretched out his rubber arm to sneak away the roast chicken in front of him, and flew out with a punch. Impressive. Sabo looked at the pulled-out Reikiri, his eyes glowing. Ace also leaned over and said excitedly, "What a beautiful knife, does this knife have a name?" Reikiri. How handsome. The three of Ace, Luffy, Sabo's eyes glowed brightly. Behind the counter. Is that so? Kuina succeeded in preparing a glass of bubbling fruit beer following the method Makino said. Yes, exactly. Makino glanced back. Then she raised her eyes and looked at the noisy table, with a gentle smile in her eyes. As time goes by, the relationship between several people has become more and more familiar. Ron and Kuina sometimes suspend their swordsmanship training and go to the mountains with Ace and the three of them to have a good time. Diving, catch the unicorn, compete with a boxing monkey. Luffy couldn't even beat one, but Ron knocked down the entire monkey group alone, gaining a lot of respect from the three Ace. The old bears, giant tigers and other beasts on this mountain were defeated and tamed by Ron one after another during this time. Sometimes he even took the three of Luffy to ride a giant tiger, walking among the mountains, laughing wantonly. For the three of Luffy, strong, calm, and mature Ron has become their longing goal. This day, heavy rain came up and down the mountain. The five people hurriedly searched for a place to hide from the rain, and finally found a tree hole. 5 people sat side by side, looking at the rain curtain in front of them. I don't know who laughed first. Then all 5 of them laughed. Ron, who had strained his heartstrings in order to become stronger, is also rare to feel completely relaxed physically and mentally. After being fully integrated into the body of this age, the distance between him and the world seemed to be getting closer. Ha 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 ha, Ron, Kuina, I have decided. Luffy smiled very cheerfully. When I become One Piece, I want you to be my partners like Ace and Sabo. Do not want. Kuina directly rejected him. Why? Little Luffy looked at him puzzled. My goal is to become the world's #1 swordsman, not a pirate. Kuina said with a firm gaze. Oh, forget it. What about you, Ron? Will you be my partner? Luffy looked at Ron. The eyes of Ace, Sabo and Kuina also gathered on him. Looking at the rain curtain outside, Ron turned his head and smiled at the 4 of them. Neither can I. Sabo asked curiously. Ron, you are so strong, but you still practice so hard. Like Kuina, do you aim to be the strongest in the world? No, I want to enjoy life better. Quote. All 4 of them looked dumbfounded. You think, if you are not strong enough, you can eat good food, drink good wine, go wherever you want, and do whatever you want to do. Ron said solemnly to the 4 of them. So, my goal is to become a traveler with absolute strength and enjoy life as his life goal. As this, what is the difference from the pirate? Of course, Ron said without hesitation. I'm not interested in that big secret treasure, and I don't intend to snatch other people's things, and I don't have the plan to dominate the sea and dominate. How can I be considered a pirate? Quote. Ace, Sabo, Kuina were all speechless by him. It turns out that this is the reason why you cultivate so hard. It's a unique idea. Luffy scratched his head and said, so, being a traveler is more free than being a One Piece. Then I don't want to be a One Piece, I also want to be a traveler. Little Luffy, when you can hit me, let's talk about being a traveler. Ron raised his hand and flexed his fingers, and smiled and snapped his forehead. Little Luffy touched his forehead, grinned at him, and smiled stupidly. Ace looked at him indulgently. Idiot Luffy. Several people laughed for a while. This happy and peaceful day did not last long. What Sabo had always worried about still happened. His father, the noble Audiobook III, issued a tracing order, which was posted around the Goa Kingdom to find his trace. In the middle of the night, he looked at the missing person order in his hand, looked at Ace and Luffy who were still asleep, and made up his mind secretly and made a decision. This day, after finishing the exercise, Sabo called Ron and said something to him alone. 2 days later, Sabo disappeared from Mount Gorbo without saying goodbye. When Ace and Luffy went crazy looking for him, Ron came to the bandit house. Inside the thief's house, Dadan was dangling a cigarette, looking at a missing person in his hand slightly in a daze. Big sister, a little devil came outside and said he wanted to look for you. Huh, kid. Dadan stood up, I'll go and see. She walked out of the house. A black-haired boy with a long knife was standing in front of the house. There were a group of fierce and tall bandits in front of him, but his expression was plain and calm and surprising. Which kid are you? Dadan walked up to him and said. What are you looking for? Before Sabo leaves, please ask me to find an opportunity to give you this letter. The words of the black-haired boy made Dadan's expression slightly change in an instant. She took a letter handed over by him, did not rush to open it, but looked at him and said, I heard that Ace, Sabo, Luffy and the 3 of them are practicing with a boy about their age. That boy should be you. Bar. Ron was noncommittal. Sabo, did he tell you anything? Ron glanced at the tracing order in her hand, looked at the old woman who was fierce in appearance but kind in heart, and said, he said he will go back and have a decision with that house. If everything goes well, soon we'll be back. Dadan's hand holding the locating order loosened slightly. Then why doesn't he talk to us in person? I also asked him this question. He said that if he speaks to you face to face, he may not be able to make up his mind in the end. Ron whispered. That stupid kid. Dadan wiped tears from the corners of his eyes. It's just going home, is it necessary to be so hypocritical? How can I worry about hurting others? Ron didn't say anything, but he knew in his heart how much Sabo hated that home. Choosing to go back and settle everything alone is how much courage he took. Then, I'll leave first. Ron nodded at her, turned around and planned to leave. Thank you for helping Sabo and saving Luffy and them. Dadan's voice rang behind him, causing him to leave slightly. After Ace and Luffy came back, after learning about the situation from Dadan, the 2 people who were anxious and panicked were relieved. Early the next morning, Ace and Luffy appeared in front of Ron again. Ace said seriously to him, even if Sabo leaves temporarily, Luffy and I will continue to practice and practice with you. When Sabo comes back next time, the 2 of us will definitely beat him up. Luffy also laughed stupidly. From this day on, the number of people cultivating behind Ron has changed from 3 to 2. Another half-month passed. Sabo still didn't come back. This day, Ron returned to the tavern from outside, and suddenly learned a news. Sabo was kidnapped. When Ron heard the news from the weeping and sad Makino, he couldn't help but stunned. What happened? I'm not very clear. I heard that Sabo seemed to be locked up by his parents after he got home, knocked down the guards and ran away from home, accidentally offended celestial dragons, and was taken away. Makino cried very sad. Sister Makino, stop crying, just being taken away, maybe I can come back. Kuina comforted her on the sidelines. The guy in the tavern next to him shook his head and said in a low voice. That's the celestial dragons, the nobles of the world, offended them, even the nobles. Sabo. Makino covered his face with his hands. Kuina couldn't bear to see her so sad, and looked at Ron for help. Ron looked heavy and was silent. He didn't expect that the plot would develop like this after he intervened. Even if it is him now, it is also unclear whether Sabo is alive or dead. Early the next morning, Ron saw Ace and Luffy in the same place. Their eyes were red and swollen, and their expressions were low. Are you okay? When Luffy heard Ron's words, tears flowed from his eyes again, his arms blocked in front of his eyes. Don't cry, Luffy. Ace scolded Luffy, and then squeezed a very ugly smile at Ron. It's okay. Sabo is very smart. Even if he is taken away by celestial dragons, he will definitely find a way to escape. Although we won't see each other for a long time now and in the future, I believe we will definitely meet again in the sea in the future. Sure, we must meet again. Luffy sobbed with tears and snot on his face. He wiped away the tears and nose all over his face, and looked at Ron firmly and said. I must become stronger than Ron you, and then go and fly all the people who took Sabo away. Okay, From today, the training will be doubled. Sabo's sudden departure turned the playfulness of Luffy and Ace into right. The desire to become stronger trains more and more desperately. The two are in the growth stage, making rapid progress. This day after the end of training, Ace was lying on the grass in a big font, looking at the sky and suddenly said, "Luffy, Ron, I have decided." Ron standing next to him and Luffy lying beside him look at him first. "I will go to sea in the year I am 17 and start my adventure on this vast sea," Ace firmly said. "Why is it 17 years old?" Luffy asked curiously. "Don't you remember? Sabo said in the letter that he is a child of a noble family, and he will officially become a nobleman at the age of 18, so he plans to go to sea when he is 17. Therefore, I will also be 10 years old. I went to sea when I was 7 years old. Then I have to be like you. Haha, then you will be 3 years behind me. When you go to sea, I must have become a famous big pirate." Ace smiled, eyes full of yearning. "At that time, I must go and retrieve Sabo, and the three brothers will be reunited again. Then I, who became the One Piece King, will beat Sabo away, celestial dragons." Luffy grinned when he thought of this, and laughed. "Ron, when we meet again in the ocean, I will definitely not be so weak again. Then let's try again." Ace got up and looked at Ron on the side, with a wary expression on his face. "Yes, but if you lose at that time, you have to buy me the best wine." Ron smiled at it. During the time in the tavern, his drunkenness was completely aroused, and every day he had to have a sip of fruit beer made by Makino himself. No problem. Such days continued for a while. It has been almost 2 months since Ron and Kuina came to Windmill Town. In the evening of this day, after bidding farewell to Luffy and Ace, Ron had just returned to the tavern with Reikiri on his back. The door of the tavern was opened. An old man with white hair, white beard, tall, broad-chested, wearing shorts and a floral shirt walked in, raised his hand at Makino and smiled. "Yo, Makino, are you okay?" "He is." Ron looked at him, startled slightly. "Ah, Mr. Garp." Makino was very pleasantly surprised to see the visitors. "How did you come?" "Haha, I took a 1-month vacation, and come back to see my 2 grandsons." Garp smiled heartily and walked to the counter. "Bring me a beer, some ice." Makino handed him a cold beer, and he drank it in one gulp. "Mr. Garp, Sabo." "Ah, I have heard about that." Garp put down his beer glass and said with a deep expression, "That fool Sabo. He actually provokes those guys." Makino was silent and filled him with beer. What happened after Sabo was taken away? A voice rang in Garp's ear. He turned his head and looked away. A well-proportioned black-haired boy with a long knife, black short sleeves and white shorts, was standing next to him, looking at him calmly. "You are." Garp looked at him with a little doubt in his eyes. "Ron, are you Sabo's friend?" "That's it." Ron looked directly at the marine hero in front of him. "I have answered your question, but you haven't answered mine yet." "Haha, funny kid. Well, I will answer your question because you are Sabo's friend." Garp laughed. Then he picked up the beer glass, his expression was low, and he said. When the old man learned the news, he immediately entrusted a friend who was on that ship to guard him to inquire about the news and find out what happened that day. Sabo did offend celestial dragons, but the cause was that he was trying to save a little girl who accidentally fell and stood in front of celestial dragons. Garp said lowly. After being taken to the celestial dragon's ship, celestial dragons seemed to put him and some slaves on a small boat, and then used artillery to destroy the small boat. What? Makino couldn't help covering his mouth with his hand, his eyes widened. Garp poured tons of beer into his mouth. Ron didn't say a word, and turned to leave. Don't tell Luffy and the others about this. Garp looked at Makino. Makino wiped the tears from his face. I know. Garp turned his head and glanced at the little figure from behind. That kid named Ron, is he from Windmill Town? No, he is from an island outside, and there is a girl with him. The two have been in Windmill Town for almost 2 months. Makino Kaido. He has a very good relationship with Ace, Sabo, and Luffy. Ace and the 3 of them were still exercising with him before. Mr. Garp, don't you think Ron is young, but he is very strong? Oh, Garp was a little surprised. He squeezed his chin and became interested. That old man would like to see and see. Early the next morning, When Ron reached the foot of the mountain, Ace and Luffy were already there, and Garp was with them. Ron, this old man is my grandpa. Little Luffy with a straw hat pointed to Garp and introduced to Ron. In the next second, a huge fist hit his head. Who is it called the old man? Impolite guy, call me grandpa. It hurts. It hurts. Grandpa's fist hurts the most. Luffy hugged his bulging head and rolled and wailed. When Ron saw this scene, his eyes flickered. That is hockey. Garp looked at Ron while digging his nose. Boy Ron, just follow your usual training and don't care about me. No one cares about you in the first place. Ace murmured. In the next second, he was blasted out by a fist. Luffy and Ace each carried a big red bag on their heads, and followed Ron to start today's training. Garp sat cross-legged on a rock, took a piece of senbei from his arms and ate it while looking at the three of them. Compared to the last time, both Luffy and Ace's physical stamina have indeed improved substantially. Garp thought to himself, his gaze fell on Ron. That kid named Ron, although his exercise method is still slightly rough, he can exercise his muscles very well. And Garp fixed his eyes on Ron. What is going on with this unreasonable huge energy and blood? A 10-year-old kid who is about the age of Ace can grow to this level with this exercise method. After a huge amount of physical exercise, Ace and Luffy were limp on the ground, sweating profusely. And Ron still seemed to be okay. After thinking for a while, Garp stepped over. Boy Ron, do you want to practice with the old man? Ace and Luffy were taken aback when they heard this. Grandpa wants to compete with Ron. Good. Ron heard Garp's words almost without thinking. He really urgently needs a strong opponent, an opponent who can fully display his power. Ace and Luffy stepped aside, staring intently at the two large and small figures in the court. Old man to Ron. Ace swallowed. For him now, these two people are the two most powerful people he knows. Go Ron. Kill that stinky grandpa. Luffy shouted in the field. Luffy, don't call me stinky grandpa. Garp yelled at him. The Ron opposite him closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Breath of the sun, full focus. After the master's degree reached 46%, he was able to perform the full concentration of the sun-breathing method. The huge and hot blood inside Ron began to boil, and the hair went without wind, and an invisible force rose from him. He intends to use this test to go all out to test how much his current strength can reach. Oh, Garp couldn't help looking sideways, shocked. This kid, can the master of chi and blood reach this level? Ron stepped on his feet, and his figure disappeared in the eyes of Ace and Luffy. Disappeared. The two of them stared wide. The next second he appeared in front of Garp, and threw a fierce whip kick to his neck. Garp raised his arm to block the blow. A violent wind spread to the surroundings, and the little Luffy sitting on the ground was directly blown backwards and rolled around. This speed, and this strength. Garp was more shocked after blocking the blow. But before he could think about it, Ron was blocked with one blow, his body flipped in the air, and another slammed knee hit, smashing into Garp's face. And this way of fighting without procrastination, simply and fierce. Garp jumped back to avoid the blow. Ron's knee hit a small hole on the ground he was on. The blood value of a normal adult is 30 points. And Ron's current vitality value has reached. And such a huge force acting on a small fist, the attack power is even more amazing. Under his full punch, ordinary steel would be instantly shattered. After running breath of the day, facing a formidable opponent like Garp, Ron was completely in a state of battle, without scruples and closing hands, just unleashing his strength with all his strength. He increased his speed to ultimate and launched a stormy attack towards Garp. Ace and Luffy could only see phantoms flashing around Garp. After every heavy sound, a violent wind swept around from the big and small two people. Bang bang bang. Ron has never been so happy. The huge power accumulated in his body seemed to be cheering. The permanent buff true meaning of thousands of practices is also activated. Make Ron fight harder and harder. His speed is getting faster and faster, and his strength is getting heavier and heavier. Finally, a punch hit Garp in the face, causing him to stagger. Then there was another blow from top to bottom, hitting Garp's head. The ground was shaken. Garp's feet sank deeply, cracks spreading all around. But even after being attacked by Ron twice in a row, Garp still didn't fall. Good boy. Garp raised his head and threw a punch at Ron with a big smile. Ron also threw a punch. Two fists, one big and one small, that were very different, collided together. Boom! A violent wind that was far higher than before blew around, and both Ace and Luffy were turned over by the blower. Ron flew out with a punch. After turning around in the air, his feet landed on the ground, leaving a long scratch on the ground, and falling next to Reikiri where he was stuck on the ground with his sheath. He stood up and reached out to hold the handle of the Reikiri knife stuck on the ground. The breath of thunder, the form of one, the thunderbolt, a flash. Accompanied by the thunder of tearing the air, a golden thunder and lightning flashed across the mountains and forests. Ha ha, good job. Garp laughed and threw a punch. Boom, the entire mountain and forest clearing was shaken. The grass clippings are flying with the dust. Ace and Luffy under the big tree a little further away looked silly and dumbfounded. The breath of water, the three-shaped stream dances. Boom, the breath of the moon, the two-shaped pearl flower makes the moon. Boom, the breath of the sun the second type of Bai Luo Tian. Boom, with Ron holding Reikiri in his hand, he performed the accompanying swordsmanship with various breathing characteristics. The power is amazing, and the unpredictable slashes cut to Garp mercilessly. Garp waved a pair of iron fists and took every slash abruptly. I didn't even use armament hockey, at most I only used the iron body from Marine 6 styles. Ron now faces him as if facing an invisible mountain, he can only look up. Ron couldn't help thinking when he was punched by Garp against the Reikiri knife. His vitality value is at least 10 times that of mine. The more Garp hits, the more shocked it gets. Huge vitality, amazing physique. Can a physical attack that relies solely on strength and speed have such power? No, this kid has even achieved this level of swordsmanship. And the knife in his hand is also unusual. This kid is really only 10 years old. No, it seems that his strength is still improving. How amazing. The breath of the sun, the three-shaped scorching sun red mirror. Ron played the strongest sword he could currently slash. A crimson arc slashed towards Garp horizontally. A beautiful sword. Garp complimented, and then slashed the slash directly into the sky with a punch from the bottom to the top. Then he looked at Ron, who was holding Reikiri, his arms trembling constantly, and his face was pale, panting. Ron laughed. Is this your strongest strength right now? Ron looked at him and nodded with a complicated expression. Really, he is far from the opponent of the marine hero in front of him. Well, then this competition will end here. Garp stepped up to him. The ground around the two of them had been damaged in a disastrous manner. Garp knelt down and patted Ron on his shoulders, causing him to tremble and almost fell. Garp stared at him and said very seriously, "Boy Ron, come and be marine. The old man will teach you everything he has learned, and the old man assures you that you can definitely become the strongest marine ever." Oral Tile Road. Ron looked at the marine hero in front of him and said without hesitation, "First won't be marine." Garp's eyes narrowed. Why? Is there anything wrong with being a marine? Or do you want to be a pirate just like Ace and the others? He was a little flustered. He has this kind of strength at the age of 10 years old. What if you give him some more time? If such a monster is allowed to become a pirate, Sengoku will definitely tear him up if he knows it. I will not be a marine, and I will not be a pirate. Ron returned Reikiri in his hands. Garp breathed a sigh of relief when he heard the words. Even if this kid is improper, marine is regrettable, but as long as he doesn't become a pirate, it's okay. Garp can accept it. Unlike his grandson who opened his mouth and shut his mouth to be the One Piece king, his anger could kill him. If you don't want to be a marine, then the old man can't teach you. Garp stood up, looked at Ron and said with regret. Otherwise, he is absolutely sure that he can train the Ron in front of him to become the strongest marine ever. No, I can become stronger myself. Ron said unceremoniously. There is a system that can sign in to become stronger, and a permanent buff that can shorten the training time. He is confident in the speed at which his strength improves. This time he used all his strength to fight Garp, and it was a great harvest for him. After he was completely digested and assimilated, he might be able to rise to the next level. Old Garp, I just want to know one thing. What? Garp held his arms and raised his eyebrows, and he was a little concerned about calling himself Old Garp, but for the sake of him saying that he was not a pirate, he really didn't care about it. What kind of level is my current strength in the ocean? Ron looked at him and asked. Well, Garp thought for a while with his arms folded and said, although you are not a fruit-powered person, and you don't know how to hockey, but your physical strength is far superior to others, plus your swordsmanship and slashing slashes you want. In my opinion, your strength is almost equivalent to a pirate offering a reward of 20 to 30 million. In our marine, we almost have the strength of a colonel in our headquarters. I know a natural fruit-capable person called Smoker, who just came out of Marine Academy. You are not much different from his current strength. But if you really want to fight, you probably won't be his opponent. Sure enough, hockey is still missing. Ron thought to himself. He glanced at Garp in front of him. It would be best if he could teach himself hockey. Seems to see his thoughts. Garp winked at him and smiled. If you want me to teach you to become stronger, you have to worship me as a teacher and join Marine. Ron held Reikiri and turned away. The next period of time. Every time Ron exercises with Ace Luffy, Garp will be there. Although Ron still wants to play a few more games with him, Garp is an attitude that I teach you only when you worship me as a teacher and join Marine, which annoys him. From time to time, he would also be in front of Ron, pointing out Kuina's swordsmanship and body skills. The two wanted to learn and teach, but they secretly competed over the question of whether to join Marine. That being said, but Garp and Ron sometimes drink together in Makino's tavern. When two figures, one large and one small, sit side by side in front of the counter, they are really eye-catching. Makino couldn't help but laugh every time he saw the drunk old and young two sitting at the counter and hooking their shoulders to each other and complimenting each other. That evening, after Ron finished training Ace and Luffy, Garp called him to his side. Ron sat down beside him. What do you want me to do? Garp, wearing a floral shirt, sat cross-legged beside him, changed his old smile, and said to Ron sternly. Ron, the old man wants to know why you don't want to be a Marine. Is it because of Sabo? That's right, Ron whispered. For me, what Marine calls justice is a heavy chain. The justice and evil in this world have long been represented and distinguished by Marine and the pirates. That's right, I didn't expect you to have this kind of sentiment at a young age. Garp took out a piece of senbei from his arms. Would you like to eat senbei? Ron reached out his hand. Garp reluctantly handed him a piece. The two ate senbei together. Garp said as he ate, everyone who is a Marine has justice that he wants to protect in his heart. Everyone is different. Some are stubborn and some are old-fashioned, but the overall is good. But among the pirates, there is only a small part is special, and most of the other pirates are villains who do bad things and are full of evil. Kaka. Garp rattled the senbei in his mouth, turned his head to look at Ron and said, I am also very angry about Sabo. The old man also knows that those celestial dragons are all trash. But in this matter, the old man can do nothing. Because those trash celestial dragons are standing in order, if this order is broken, the whole world will become extremely chaotic, and it will turn up a storm that overturns the whole world. Even a small place like Windmill Town will not be spared. But old man, I hope that there will be changes in the future, with the hands of the young Marine in the future, instead of letting the pirates conflict with the rules of order and triggering a chaotic storm that overturns the world. Garp watched Ron's eyes become extremely serious. Ron, you have great potential. You have more potential than anyone the old man has ever met. The future is immeasurable. The old man sincerely hopes that you can become the hand that promotes the change of the world in the future. So, join Marine. Ron lowered his head and ate the senbei, and was silent for a long time. Whether to join Marine or not is determined by what I have seen with my own eyes. What's the meaning? He raised his eyes to look at Garp, grinned, and said what he said made Garp stunned. Does Marine recruit interns? 1 month later. Naval Headquarters. Marineford. Marines. Interns. Sengoku was taken aback. Do we have interns at Marine? There are interns on the pirate ship, why doesn't Marine have? Garp, wearing the Marine Justice robe, sat aside, eating the donuts and said, that's what the kid said. Naughty. Can our Marine be like those pirates? Sengoku was annoyed. Sengoku, do you disagree? Garp narrowed his eyes. Sengoku looked at Garp with an idiot look. Of course we disagree. How could we Marine set up a Marine intern for a 10-year-old kid that we have never had before? Garp, don't you eat donuts? Garp stuffed a piece of donut into his mouth and glanced obliquely at Sengoku behind the table. Fortunately, I still said a lot of good things to Marine in front of that kid. If he doesn't join Marine from now on, Sengoku, you don't regret it. I regret it. As Martial Marine, have you ever regretted the decision I made? Sengoku got up and patted the table, and said annoyed at Garp, it's you who gave me nothing to do all day, and the pirates didn't catch it. There was only a 10-day vacation, so I went back to see your grandson for a month. The kid who popped up suddenly changed the rules of Marine and went to learn what the pirate did as an intern. Garp dug his nose and said, I'm not here and nothing big happened. Sengoku burst into flames. He rushed out from behind the table, grabbed the donuts in Garp's hand, and poured them all into his mouth. Ah, my donut. Sengoku, you fool. Garp looked at the empty bag and clenched his fists. Hurry up and catch the pirate, Garp Vice Admiral. Sengoku glanced at him diagonally. It's overwhelming with the military rank, right? No way. The two eyes collided. Garp snorted and walked towards the door. Before walking out of the door, he stopped, turned his head and glanced at Sengoku behind the table. I had a fight with Ron, that kid. Oh, so what? Sengoku didn't lift his head either. So I know his strength. Garp clasped his nose and said, he is not a fruit-capable person, but his strength is definitely not inferior to the natural fruit-capable person Smoker who just graduated from Marine College this year. Sengoku, who was about to process the document, suddenly stood up from behind the table, looking at Garp with shocked expression on his face. Garp, what did you just say? Did you not hear what I said? Garp dug his nose, turned his head and glanced at the shocked Sengoku behind him with a smile. Why, my ears don't work well when I get older. You said that kid is not inferior to Smoker. Sengoku couldn't care less about Garp and asked anxiously. Good. Garp flicked the nose between his fingers, inserted his hands into the pants kabuto, and looked sideways at Sengoku with a grin. And he is only 10 years old this year, Sengoku, you should know what that means. Sengoku's eyes gradually widened, and his heart vibrated. Smoker, as a natural fruit ability person and a disciple of Zephyr, is already the most outstanding student in this class of Marine Academy. And now, a 10-year-old child with an innocent resume and not a person with fruit ability can actually have the strength comparable to him. If this is true, Garp, can you make sure what you say is true? Sengoku looked serious. Do you think the old man would be joking about this kind of thing? Garp, who was standing at the door with his back facing him, looked at him sideways. I don't think so. Sengoku took a deep breath, calmed his shocked heart, and then looked at Garp and said solemnly. What's the kid's name? Ron. Good. Sengoku looked serious. As Martial Marine, I agree to let him be our Marine intern. Kuhahaha. Didn't someone say that they would never change Marine's rules for a 10-year-old kid? Garp turned to look at Sengoku and laughed. Long-winded. Who told you not to make it clear in advance? Annoyed, Sengoku picked up a document on the desk and smashed it at Garp, who was caught directly by Garp. After Sengoku sat down, he couldn't help but ask. When will the child come? About the beginning of spring next year. I just taught him hockey's practice methods, and he said that he would learn it before coming back. Garp didn't know where he took out another bag of donuts, and said as he ate it. You are too impatient. Sengoku couldn't help sighing when he heard his words, and folded his hands on his forehead. If this kid doesn't want to be a Marine after a year, and turns to be a pirate, don't you teach him hockey to make him stronger? Ha ha ha, don't worry Sengoku, I have already asked. Even if Ron is not a Marine, he won't be a pirate. Garp ate the donuts and said, I can assure you about this, otherwise I won't be able to teach him. I hope it's as you said. 3 months later. Goya Kingdom. Windmill Town. In a mountain forest, Ron faced a big rock in front of him and punched it out. His fist plunged directly into the stone, and cracks spread to the surroundings. Sure enough, it doesn't work. It can only be entangled, but cannot be strengthened. Ron looked at the stone in front of him and couldn't help sighing. He learned armament hockey a month after Garp left. It's just that until now, he can only wrap his body as he wants, but cannot strengthen it. Armament hockey is something that everyone is born with and can be strengthened through practice. It is related to 2 things about people: blood and willpower. If one of the 2 fails to reach a certain level, you will definitely not be able to feel hockey. Cultivating armament hockey is to use willpower to control the vitality and blood, and then integrate into one's own aura, murderousness, fighting spirit, and other invisible feelings to the naked eye, turning it into a weapon that one owns. On the basis of chi and blood, adding powerful aura, murderous aura. Wait for the invisible feelings to the naked eye, and then use willpower to control it, and then you will be able to master this power. After getting the knack, continue to exercise one's own physical courage to increase energy and blood, exercise courageous momentum, and increase willpower, and this power can be strengthened. This is the training method of armament hockey taught by Marine hero, Iron Fist Garp, the world's top hockey powerhouse. The highest level of observation hockey is innate, called, listen to the breath of all things, and can be achieved entirely by talent. Although Garp taught Ron how to practice observation hockey, he still hasn't felt his own observation hockey yet. Conqueror's hockey is even more distant. Ron has only walked through the 3 islands now, and even East Blue has not walked out. Both the world he has seen and the strong players he has played against are very few. Just like a newborn chick, it does not yet possess the spirit of a king. System, list my current attributes. Yes. Host, Ron. Age, 10. Blood value, Breath of the Sun Master Degree, 53%. Swordsmanship, the Realm of Power, Dachang. Weapon, 21 Work of Big Sharp Knife Reikiri. Permanent buff Thousands of Tempers No True Meaning Binding. Armament Hockey, LV1. My current strength is definitely enough in East Blue, but in Marine, it's definitely not a big deal. Ron looked at his attributes on the virtual screen and thought to himself. Before first go to Marine as an intern, I still have to become stronger, at least the swordsmanship must reach the ideal state. There seem to be several islands nearby. Find some time to go there and see if you can activate a few more sign-in tasks. The next 5 or 6 months. Ron often takes Kuina out of Windmill Town for a period of time, ranging from 7 days to half a month. Kuina has rapidly improved her swordsmanship in actual combat against the bandits, pirates, bandits and villains who abducted children. The most dangerous time was when she was in a battle with a paramesha who was able to stab the fruit. Because she didn't know the ability of the other party, she was directly pierced through the shoulder by its fruit ability, and she instantly lost the ability to move. After that, it fell to the ground, and was pierced through the palm of the hand by 2 thorns emerging from the ground and nailed to the ground. If Ron hadn't made it in time, she would be in danger. This encounter also made Kuina sober up a lot. From then on, she didn't dare to despise the enemy, even the weakest enemy. In the past few months, Ace and Luffy, although the time for practicing and exercising with Ron has shortened, they have not slackened in their exercises, and have carried out the most basic physical training day after day. When Ron came back, the 2 brothers were already able to knock down an old bear. Ron has made the most progress. According to Kuina, it is. I don't know how strong he is now. She saw with her own eyes that a captain was offered a reward of 17 million Baileys, and a group of more than 50 pirates was chopped down by Ron alone. The captain of the pirate was tied up by Ron and sent to Marine stationed in the Kingdom of Goya in exchange for several bags of money. When the 2 of them took some money back, they both looked dumbfounded at Makino and the tavern guy. And these are all Kuina knows. There are many secrets that Kuina doesn't know. After Ron wiped out the pirates, bandits, and kidnappers, they all put all their wealth into the system space. He even accidentally found a treasure on an island. It seems to be buried here by a pirate group in the past. There are a lot of gold products in the treasure. Ron roughly estimated that this treasure alone can be exchanged for 300 million Baileys. In short, Ron doesn't need to worry about money at all for the time being. In this way, Ron would take Kuina on a commercial ship from time to time to go to other islands, and sometimes he would take action to teach pirates and bandits who were not long-eyed. The rest of the year passed in an instant. The deeds of the traveler Ron and the blue-haired female swordsman have spread among the people of the Goa Kingdom and the surrounding East Blue Islands. This day, it's snowing in Windmill Town. In the tavern, Makino was the host and invited members of the Dayton bandit family, as well as Ace Luffy and Ron Kuina to host a banquet together. Crowded. The little Luffy who has never seen so much meat has his eyes glowing, and the boss with a bulging stomach can't walk at all and keeps his hands. In the end, he really ate and fell asleep on the ground, saying something in his mouth. I like banquets like, the meat is delicious. Ace sat by the window, looked at Luffy and smiled, then turned to look at the snowflakes outside, with a trace of miss in his eyes. Sabo, are you okay? After the banquet, on the balcony on the second floor, Kuina and Ron leaned on the railing, watching the small town in front of them gradually being covered with snow. Have you been here for a year in a blink? Ron said with emotion. Yeah, as if the day I first came was yesterday. Kuina put her arms on the railing, her chin on her arms, and looked sideways at Ron, who was leaning on the railing, and smiled. I think it was great to be able to leave the gym and come here with Ron. Yes, otherwise, I won't meet Makino's sister, Kemi, Ace, Luffy and others. Then her eyes dimmed. It's just that, after all, we still have to make a difference. Ron raised his head and looked at the snow in the sky, and said with a smile, we will meet again, and we will separate for our own goals. When we meet again, the joy of harvest will definitely be more. Makes sense. Kuina smiled again. She turned to look at Ron and said, Ron, have you decided to go to Marine with Mr. Garp? Ron heard the words, and after hesitating for a while, he looked at her and nodded. Okay, then we will separate for now. Kuina bent her eyes and smiled at him. Subsequently, a scene that surprised Ron happened. Kuina reached out and hugged him. In the snowy night of winter night, a brightly lit pub on the second floor balcony, the girl with short blue hair hugged the black-haired boy who was bewildered. At a loss, Ron scratched his cheek with his finger. First won't join Marine. I'm just going there as a Marine intern for a while, it shouldn't be very long. I know. Kuina, who wrapped his arms around his neck, pressed it to his ear and whispered, Ron, you have been practicing so hard for a long time. Like me, you want to become stronger for a big goal. It is precisely because of this that I will not be surprised no matter what decision you make. So, you don't have to worry about me, don't affect you because of my father's words. Even if I separate from Ron, I will continue to stride forward, toward my ambitions. Kuina let go of Ron, and smiled at him with crystal tears in the corner of her eyes. When I meet again next time, I will definitely be a powerful female swordsman who will surprise you. I will look forward to that day. Ron looked at her and smiled. At that time, let's go on a sea trip together. Kuina picked up the teardrops from the corner of her eyes and nodded at him with a smile. Yeah, it's an agreement. Soon it was the beginning of spring. Ron is 11 years old. Nearly 3 years have passed since I came to Pirate World. Before the ice completely melted, Garp, wearing a dog's head hat and a robe of justice, came to pick Ron up on a warship. Then I'll go one step ahead. Ron, carrying a long knife and a package, stood beside Garp and waved goodbye to Kuina, Ace, Luffy, Makino and others. Well, I will go to sea in a few years. Ace grinned at him, let's see you on the ocean then. Ron. All the time, thank you. Little Luffy waved to Ron vigorously, grinning, Ron, remember to come back to play sometime. By the way, if you see Sabo, you must remember to write to me and tell me. Okay. Ron smiled at both of them, even if I leave, don't be lazy. When I see you next time, I don't want you to still be able to beat me with a punch. Don't worry, I will be able to beat you up by then. These are some of my new wines, which should suit your taste. Bring them. Makino stepped forward and handed a wooden box containing a wine bottle to Ron. Ron thanked him. All the time, thank you for your care, Makino. Makino smiled and wiped away the tears from the corners of his eyes, and looked at Ron with a gentle smile as always. I look forward to hearing your name on the ocean soon, Ron. Ron looked at Kuina at last. She didn't say anything, just stretched out a fist at him with a smile. Ron understood what she meant. Don't forget our promise. Are you ready to say hello? Garp, with his arms folded, looked at him and asked. Okay, then go. Ron nodded, waved to everyone, then turned and followed Garp as he walked away from the road. Kuina stopped and watched where she was for a long time. Kuina, go back. Makino put a hand on her shoulder and said softly. Sister Makino, am I weak? No, you are already very strong. Kuina shook her head. It's still not enough. I can feel that the gap between me and him is getting further and further. This is not what I want. Makino didn't know what to say. If I continue like this, I'm afraid I won't even be able to see his back, let alone stand beside him. Kuina's eyes were firm. I have to become stronger. On the warship, Ron, who had put his luggage and long knife in the house, stood alone by the railing, watching the island getting smaller and smaller. Behind him, several Marine members looked at the little figure and talked. That is the Marine intern who was specially recruited by Marshal Sengoku in the rumor. It looks like a normal boy, it doesn't seem to be special. Is he a man of fruit power? I do not know. You. Garp, wearing a white suit, a dog's head hat and a robe of justice, walked over and said to the Marines, "Don't talk behind others. Don't you know it's rude?" Ah, yes, yes. After driving away the Marines, Garp walked to Ron and looked at him with a smile. How is hockey learning? Not very good, there is no suitable opponent, progress is slow. Ron said, lying on the railing, looking at the sea in front of him. Ha ha ha, when you arrive at Marine headquarters, you can have as many opponents as you want. Garp laughed. Say in advance, I'm just an intern specially recruited by Marine, and first won't help Marine catch pirates or something. Marine is not short of people yet to the point where it needs an 11-year-old kid to lead soldiers to catch the pirates. Garp snapped his nose. I have already talked to Sengoku, you can go to the Marine Academy to visit and learn. After you train with the strong there, you will definitely become stronger. Ron glanced at Garp, a little surprised. Marine is so relieved of me. Well, I still want to win you over. Garp flicked his booger. Sengoku guy, the Marine power who has been born after these years has turned his head in anxious manner. If a little monster like you can join Marine and cultivate it well, it can completely support an era. In the 3-year internship period, even if you don't want to join Marine at the end, as long as you don't help the pirates and Marine as enemies, and if you are willing, you can always wear the title of Marine Special Intern, except that you can't mobilize the army and weapons. There are still a lot of other privileges, which should be very useful to you. But if you show that you are close to the pirates and are hostile to Marine. Garp said this, stopping to look at Ron. Ron understood the meaning in his eyes. I will be wiped out in the cradle as soon as possible. Garp laughed. That's about it. Garp actually didn't say something. The fact that Ron became a special intern of Marine has caused some controversy within Marine. Some people did not agree to change Marine's rules for the sake of a child. It was Sengoku who took out the authority of the Marshal to eliminate all differences. If Ron betrays Marine, Sengoku will be the one to take the main responsibility. And this decision was made not because Sengoku believed in a child who had never been masked, but because he believed in his best friend Garp. And is willing to take out his position as a marshal for the future of Marine, and bet once. 10 days later, the warship left East Blue and came to Calm Belt. Because of the sea stone on the bottom of the warship, it will not be attacked by the huge sea kings in the Calm Belt area. At the time of reaching the Calm Belt, mist rose on the surface of the sea. Immediately, a pirate ship slowly emerged from the fog. The flag is a skull covered with 9 snakes that look like the sun. The pirate ship was towed forward by 2 huge snakes. How is it possible that in addition to the Marine warships, there are even pirate ships that can enter the Calm Belt? A young Marine looked at the pirate ship passing by in shock. Need an attack. Garp Vice Admiral. Garp was awakened with a snoring and nasal blisters. After taking a look, he waved his hand and said, No, no, no attack. That's the 9 Snakes Pirates group, not on the Pirates group that has been offered a reward. After speaking, he went to sleep again. The young Marines nearby were startled. 9 Snake Pirates, never heard of it. Obviously it is a pirate group, but don't you need to capture it? Marine scratched his head and watched the ship slowly leave in front of the warship. Ron was also slightly taken aback. Don't these Marines even know the 9 Snakes Pirates and the Pirate Empress? He immediately reacted. At this point in time, it should be 6 years ago when Ace went to sea and 9 years ago when Luffy went to sea. Boa Hancock should have just been 20 years old. Has she not yet embarked on an expedition and won the title of Pirate Empress? It's not surprising to say that. After crossing the Calm Belt, we came to the Grand Line. Garp woke up too. Garp Vice Admiral, I need to refuel. Which is the nearest island that can be supplied? Well, it's the city of 7 Waters. Okay, just go there and supply it first. The warship arrived in the city of 7 Waters 3 days later. Garp walked to Ron, who was swinging a long knife, and grinned his eyebrows. Boy Ron, it will take a long time for the supply to be supplied. Do you want to accompany the old man to disembark and change? It's been a long time since you two fight for alcohol. Okay, my drinking capacity has improved by leaps and bounds, just like my strength. Ron retracted his sword and glanced at Garp. Old man, don't get drunk in a few cups like you did before. I don't want to carry you back. Ha ha ha, how is it possible? The old man is Garp. Your kid was not born when the old man started drinking. Garp let out a big mouthful of white fang, and laughed at Ron. Oh, who was drunk at Makino last time and called me big brother? It doesn't count that time, it doesn't count that time. Garp and Ron, two large and one small, walked off the warship, and the young Marine who heard the conversation between them were stunned. Dip, check that the host location meets the sign-in conditions. Do you sign in? Sign-in rewards can be obtained for successful sign-in. The long-lost system prompt sounded in Ron's mind. He said heartily, sign in. Sign in successfully. Get the sign-in reward. Blood value plus 10. Get the sign-in reward. Mechanical Master. A large amount of knowledge about mechanics appeared in Ron's mind for an instant, and the vast amount of knowledge made him feel like his head was about to explode in an instant. Huh, what's the matter? Garp stopped walking as he watched, and Ron asked with a strange expression on his face. No, it's nothing. Ron wiped the sweat from his forehead with his sleeve. Oh, Garp didn't doubt the others. How about that tavern? Okay, but I didn't bring any money. That one looks pretty high-end. Old man, do you have money? Ron quickly recovered after running the breathing method of the day, looked at Garp and said. No money. Garp should say. Don't worry, let them go back to the local marine to go. Quote. Don't think so much, let's go. Garp put his arm around Ron's neck and led him towards the high-end tavern. After fighting with Ron and drinking a few bottles of high-end wine, Garp drunk on the table. Ron was flushed with the drink, but his head was still clear. He took the opportunity to leave the tavern with the excuse of going to the toilet, leaving Garp here. If I remember correctly, the Pluton design is now in Frankie's hands. Ron, blushing, thought to himself. He had no interest in the Pluton design before, but after gaining the skill of Mechanical Master and a large amount of mechanical knowledge appeared in his mind, he became interested. It took a while to ask where Frankie's house was. He put on a fox mask he bought on the side of the road and sneaked into Frankie's house like a ghost. Frankie is repairing a boat with his younger brothers. You guys, give me strength today, and strive to have this ship repaired before the day after tomorrow. Yes, brother Frankie. Frankie, who was immersed in repairs, noticed that someone had walked up to him, but he only regarded it as a little brother. He didn't turn his head to look, but directly stretched out his hand. Missy, it's just right. Give me a wrench. Next second. A small hand knife hit his neck hard. Frank's eyes went dark for an instant, and he fainted and fell to the ground. Ron, wearing a fox mask, bent over, turned on the switch on his stomach, and took the Pluton design drawing from it. Then they disappeared and left silently. No one was disturbed during the whole process. When Ron returned to the warship, Garp has returned. He saw Ron and shouted at him. Ron, you kid, you didn't talk about loyalty and left the old man alone. I don't have money to pay the bill, and you are drunk again. There are still a few strong men staring at the door in the tavern. I can't take them to Marine to get the money. Don't I have to run first? Ron held the back of his head in his hands, and walked past him leisurely. And you are Garp Vice Admiral, I know you will be fine. Then why don't you find someone for the old man? Where did he go? The murdered old man explained to them for a long time, and almost never let the old man out. Huh, I thought they would know you for sure, Garp Vice Admiral. Don't you know? Ron pretended to be surprised. Garp gritted his teeth angrily, and waited for Ron to return to the warship house. The anger on Garp's face disappeared in an instant, and even a dark, relieved smile appeared. In this scene, the young Marine around him looked at each other and looked confused. I don't know what the Marine hero, Garp Vice Admiral's mind is thinking at all. Only Garp knew it. Garp put on a coat of justice, put on a dog's head hat, and stood in the hair of the warship with his arms and gave orders. Go, to Marineford. The warship set off toward Marineford, the headquarters of Marineford. And in the city of Seven Waters, Frankie's house. When Frank woke up to discover the biggest secret in himself, after the Pluton design drawings disappeared, he was struck by lightning, and at the same time, he was more confused. Why would the person who stunned him and took Pluton's design drawings know that this thing is with him? Why did you know that he was hiding here? Obviously no second person knows about this kind of thing. Could it be some kind of fruit ability? Frank couldn't help but guess. But no matter how he guesses, the Mingwang design drawings that can cause shocks in the world will never come back. And he didn't even know who took it away. Marine Headquarters. Marineford, have you heard? What? The rumored special enrollment interns seems to be arriving today. The one that Marshal Sengoku and Garp Vice Admiral liked. Right, several Marines standing on the dock whispered. Hey, you guys, don't whisper while standing guard. A general Marine wearing a Marine hat and a cigar in his mouth said to them with a smile on his face. Yes, Fire Mountain Vice Admiral, Garp Vice Admiral is back. I don't know who shouted. Afterwards, all the Marines turned their heads to look over the bay. A warship slowly approached here. There was a dog sign on the front of the warship. Anyone familiar with it knew that this was Garp's exclusive warship. In the headquarters building further away, Sengoku stood at the window and watched the warship approaching the coast. On one of the roofs, Marine Vice Admiral Aokiji was lying on it, holding his head in his hands, looking lazily there. Suddenly he opened his mouth to the side. Don't you need to go on a mission today? Pelusalino. As soon as the voice fell, a little golden flash appeared beside him, and the flash gathered into a human form. Yeah, I'm not like Sakazuki, who likes to catch pirates. Vice Admiral Kazaru Pelusalino, wearing sunglasses, a yellow shirt, a white t-shirt, and a coat of justice, put his hands in his pants and Kabuto looked at the bay and said. The person recognized by Mr. Garp. Kuzan, what kind of guy do you think it will be? Who knows? Wearing sunglasses and casual clothes, Aokiji hit Heish. By the bay, the warship docked. Garp walked down with a black-haired boy carrying a long knife and a package. Almost all Marines' eyes around the bay fell on the handsome black-haired boy. Is that him, that special intern? It seems to be no different from ordinary children. No, can a normal 10-year-old child face so many gazes so peacefully? That seems to be right. Huo Xiao Shan took a touch of Assistant Marine, walked up to Garp and Ron, and said to Garp. Garp Vice Admiral, the Marshal said that if you come back, go and see him immediately. I see. Garp nodded to him, then he looked at Ron and said, you follow this Vice Admiral first, and he will take you to the place where you live. You go and put your luggage down first. Ron nodded. Garp walked to the Marine Headquarters building, and the Huo Xiao Shan, who was biting his cigar with a smile on his face, stretched out his hand to Ron and said, I am Vice Admiral Huo Xiao Shan, the Marine Headquarters. You should be the rumored special intern Ron. Welcome. Come to Marine Headquarters. Ron reached out and held his big hand together. Come with me, I have arranged your accommodation. Ron followed him and walked towards the residence arranged for him by Marine Headquarters. After arriving at the residence, Ron just put down the famous knife rapier he was carrying in the package with his luggage and clothes. The system prompt sounded in my mind. Dip. Check the host's current area Marine Headquarters, Marineford, meet the sign-in conditions, sign-in can get sign-in rewards, do you sign in? Sign in. Sign-in is successful, get sign-in reward, vitality plus 10. Get the sign-in reward, armament hockey level up. Ron instantly felt some changes in his body. Armament hockey hardened his body, which he could not do before, but he seemed to be able to do it at this moment. System, list my current attributes. Okay. Host, Ron. Age, 11. Blood value, swordsmanship, the realm of Yi, first entry. The master degree of the day breathing method is 67%. Weapon, 21 work of big sharp knife rapier. Permanent buff thousands of tempers no true meaning binding. Armament hockey, LV3. Observation hockey, LV0. Conqueror's hockey, LV0. Skills, mechanical grandmaster. Has armament hockey reached level 3? Ron raised his right hand and clenched his fist. With a thought, his entire arm instantly turned black, as hard as steel. This is hardening. Ron armament hockey's strengthened arm clenched slightly and felt the power contained in it. Compared with before armament hockey was hardened, both the defense and the attack power were several times stronger. This is his first time into armed color hardening. It is hard to imagine the power of the kind of armament hockey who has cultivated to the top, such as Garp, if he uses his energy and blood, coupled with the peak-level armament hockey, what kind of power will a full punch have? It's probably not a problem to destroy an island. Ron then tried again. It was discovered that armament hockey, who is now only level 3, can only harden one arm, and cannot strengthen both arms at the same time. Strengthening the limbs and strengthening the whole body as you like is even more remote. Sure enough, it is still far away from becoming a real strong, and we still need to continue to practice. Ron looked out the window, clenching his fists. Start with this Marineford. Just graduated from Marine College. Smoker, a young smoker with the rank of Lieutenant Junior grade, has just returned from the mission and has not waited for him to return to his residence to take a break. A Marine who was with him found him. Smoker, the Marshal wants you to go there. Huh, what's the matter? I don't know, you can go there quickly, it seems that Garp Vice Admiral is also there. Smoker, with a cigar in his mouth, grabbed his short silver hair combed back, his expression was a bit troublesome but he still said. Got it, go to the main building, right? No, it seems to be sending you to Marine Academy. Huh, Marine Academy, Smoker was puzzled. With incomprehension and confusion, Smoker came to Marine Academy. In the underground venue created by the Marine Academy for students to compete, Smoker met Marshal Sengoku, the hero Garp, Marine General Staff and Vice Admiral Crane, and Smoker's teacher at the Marine Academy Zephyr Admiral. The four of them wore coats of justice, and just standing together, the coercion was beyond the reach of ordinary people. In the huge underground venue, in addition to these four big figures, there is also a black-haired boy who is about 11 or 12 years old, wearing a black t-shirt and white shorts. The kid I've never seen. Who? Smoker glanced at the black-haired boy with suspicion, then looked at Sengoku and asked, Marshal, what's the matter for asking me to come? Smoker, there is indeed a task for you. Sengoku looked at him. Smoker's expression became slightly serious. What an important task is the task that can be released by these four Marine big shots together. Sengoku reached out his hand to the black-haired boy standing there, and said to Smoker. Your task is to compete with him with all your strength. Smoker froze for a moment, a little unresponsive. The task for the four big men to come forward and release together is to fight with the kid over there. Are you kidding me? Smoker Lieutenant Junior grade. The voice of Marine Chief Staff Crane rang in his ears, which made him come back to his senses. He looked at Vice Admiral, and he saw a pair of eyes full of wisdom and calm. Don't be confused, we will explain it to you later. You only need to obey the order and perform the task now. Smoker's eyes flickered slightly, then he scratched his hair, turned his head to look at the black-haired boy and said. I see, just fight that kid. Okay, Sengoku nodded. Garp smiled at him with his arms around him. Smoker, don't underestimate him, or you will definitely suffer. Black Arm Zephyr didn't speak, just stared at the black-haired boy in the field. Although Smoker is not his most proud disciple, he is also the outstanding one who can persist from his devil training, and he is recognized by himself as a new force in Marine. That guy Garp, I don't know where to find a little ghost, but he said that his strength is comparable to Smoker, and he is not yet a fruitful person. Snort, there is a limit to joking. Smoker walked into the arena, and looked at the black-haired boy whose head was less than his waist and his thighs were not as thick as his arms, and the corners of his eyes twitched slightly. Such a kid, she even said she wanted to go all out or something. Isn't Mr. Garp joking, or does he have an enemy with this little devil and deliberately want to kill him? Are you ready? The black-haired boy across from him looked at him and asked. Smoker sighed slightly, forget it, don't think about that. This kind of boring competition should end as soon as possible. Come on. Smoker looked at the black-haired boy. He fell silent. The bricks under the feet of the black-haired boy on the opposite side shattered, and his figure disappeared instantly. So fast. Smoker's pupils shrink slightly. This speed. Not far away, Zephyr, Sengoku and Crane also opened their eyes slightly. Garp laughed. This kid is much faster than it was a year ago. Smoker noticed the strong wind coming from the left side, and immediately raised his left arm. Next second, a whip kick fell along with the fierce wind. Smoker instantly felt a heavy and terrifying force from his arm. Not good. Just when Smoker was about to be kicked out by that huge force, he promptly used the elemental effect of the Logia fruit, and his body turned into a cloud of smoke, unloading that force invisible. A single blow forced Smoker to use elemental power. How could there be such a power in that small body? Zephyr stared into the court with wide eyes, his face full of shock. Amazing. Vice Admiral, who has always been calm, was also a little moved. Ha ha ha, Sengoku, how is it? Garp laughed at Sengoku. It's too early, Smoker is more powerful than that. Sengoku looked at the two people in the court and said. Smoker suffered this blow and completely changed his contempt attitude. The black-haired kid in front of him is very powerful. Boy, what's your name? Ron. Ron, I remember. Smoker got serious, and part of his body turned into white smoke, constantly changing. I am a Logia smoke fruit capable person, Marine Lieutenant Junior grade, Smoker. Ron didn't talk nonsense with him, kicked his feet, rushed in front of him, and threw a right fist. Boom. There was a heavy noise in the air, and a big hole appeared in Smoker's chest, but there was no blood. It's useless, I am a Smoker now, no matter how powerful you are, it is useless for smoke. Smoker, whose chest was quickly filled with smoke, raised his fist and punched Ron. White boxing. Ron flickered, but Smoker's arm instantly turned into smoke and stretched and bent, his fist chasing Ron like a cannonball tracking the enemy. Ron turned around and punched. Smoker's fist was pierced in an instant, turning into plumes of smoke, and then condensed into a big hand, clutching Ron's arm tightly. I caught you. A cloud of smoke appeared in front of Ron, condensed into Smoker's tall figure. Zephyr saw this scene and said, the victory or defeat is already divided. Although the kid is outrageous in speed and power, he is not yet Smoker's opponent. Ha ha. Garp laughed. What are you laughing at? Garp. Zephyr turned his head angrily. As long as the kid doesn't have a way to deal with the elementalization ability of Logia Devil Fruit, he can't win Smoker. It's not bad. Crane Vice Admiral squeezed his chin and thought, but what if he holds a weapon made by Seastone in his hand? Zephyr looked stiff. No, who said that kid didn't have a way to deal with the elementalization of Logia's fruit? Garp waved his hand. The only people who can deal with the elementalization of Logia's fruit are Hockey, Seastone and fruit ability. There is no other way than that. Is that kid with fruit ability? Zephyr looked at Garp and frowned. No, it's not. Garp shook his head. Sengoku suddenly thought of something, and turned to look at Garp, with a hint of shock in his eyes. Garp, don't you mean that kid? Garp didn't answer, but just gave him a big mouthful of white fang. In the field, Smoker grabbed Ron's wrist, but it couldn't shake him. The power radiating from that wrist shocked him to perceive a fact. The black-haired boy named Ron in front of him has stronger power in his body than him. Smoker was shocked. At this moment, that small thin wrist began to exert force, Smoker's eyes shrank, and a large amount of white smoke overflowed from his body. Boy, just give in to me like this. Bye man. Strips of white smoke, like white snakes, entangled from Smoker towards Ron, who was caught by him. Soon, the flowing white smoke turned into white ropes to trap Ron in it. You lose. Smoker looked at him and said. And just as he was about to turn around, a calm boy voice came from behind. Are you just this strength? Feeling the sudden increase in momentum behind him, Smoker turned his head abruptly. The rope turned by the white smoke has been opened and turned into white smoke. The black-haired boy named Ron's hair is windless and automatic. His whole body seems to be entangled with a wave that is hard to see with the naked eye, but Smoker's heart is palpitating. Strength. Impossible. Zephyr was completely lost. His eyes widened, his mouth wide open, his expression extremely shocked, as if he had seen something beyond imagination. Crane Vice Admiral also stared at the black-haired boy in the scene blankly, with unprecedented waves in his heart. It turned out to be hockey. It only took a year to master armament hockey. Sengoku stared at the black-haired boy in the court, his voice trembling. I'll just say he is a little monster. Garp laughed. Ron was wrapped around the invisible armament hockey, and with his footsteps, he appeared in front of Smoker at a speed of phantom. Useless. Before Smoker finished speaking, Ron wrapped armament hockey's punch in the abdomen. His eyes widened in an instant, and the whole person flew out in the next second. It smashed heavily on the wall and sank deeply, with cracks all around. How is it possible? With his back stuck in the wall, Smoker, who was bleeding from his mouth, struggled to open his eyes, looking at the little figure in the distance with great horror. It turned out to be Hockey. It turned out to be Hockey, who doesn't even have a master. That kid. Envy, jealousy and unwilling, etc. The unspeakable feelings instantly filled Smoker's heart. With a low growl, he pushed his upper body through the smoke and rushed towards Ron. Ron looked at Smoker rushing towards him, raised his arm, and clenched his fist. A moment Hockey, hardened, accompanied by a sound of hockey condensed into substance. His arms and fists instantly turned into pitch black. Sengoku, Zephyr, and Crane, who watched this scene, were even more shocked. Even Garp stared blankly. This kid has reached the level of armament hockey hardening. Ha! With bloodshot eyes, Smoker raised the current master's fruit ability to ultimate, rushed towards Ron, and blasted out a punch. Ron blasted out the same hardened black fist with armament hockey. Two fists, one big and one small, collided. Boom! The billowing wind rushed to the surroundings along with the thick white smoke, blowing the coats of justice behind the Garp Sengoku 4. Chapter 31. A figure flew upside down from the white smoke. On the wall where Smoker had knocked out a big hole, there appeared a bigger hole that crumbled inward one after another. Smoker lay in it, fainting. The fight was quite cruel. That kid was as merciless as ever. Garp hugged his arms and watched him tisk. Sengoku, Zephyr, and Suru stared at the black-haired boy who appeared in the gradually dissipating white smoke. He was unscathed, except that the sleeve above his right arm was destroyed, revealing a whole arm with well-defined muscles. Sengoku retracted his gaze, looked at Zephyr and asked, "Zephyr, do you have any comments now?" Zephyr took a deep breath and looked at the black-haired boy in the scene and said solemnly, "If it is this kid, the old man has no objection and agrees with you to hire him as a marine intern." After Zephyr finished speaking, he turned to look at Sengoku and said seriously, "Sengoku, can you give this kid to the old man to exercise? The old man can guarantee that he will become a more terrifying monster than the three monsters Kuzan, Pelusalino, and Sakazuki." Before Sengoku could speak, Suru said, "I'm afraid this won't work." Zephyr frowned. "Why?" "Because he hasn't joined Marine yet, he's just a special Marine intern." Crane glanced at him and said, "Zephyr, have you considered the consequences of not joining Marine?" Zephyr's expression condensed. "Crane, what do you think should be done?" Sengoku looked at Suruchi. The gray-haired Crane Vice Admiral looked at the black-haired boy not far away for a while, then looked at Sengoku and said, "Give him the right to move freely in Marine, and allow him to voluntarily participate in tasks such as capturing pirates. Salary. According to the captain's agreement, he is not allowed to have access to core affairs, nor is anyone allowed to teach him Marine 6 styles. All information involving Marine secrets will be announced to him after he agrees to join Marine and completes the corresponding assessment." Crane cut the railroad firmly. "Give freedom and restrictions, let him judge and choose after seeing everything with his own eyes." Sengoku nodded. "I agree with Suru's view." Garp slapped Hatch and said, "The old man has no objection." Zephyr became more sober after listening to Crane's words, but still asked a question. "Then Marine Academy does not allow him to enter?" Allowed him to participate in student training, but neither your Zephyr nor the college teacher can teach him anything," Crane said to him with his arms folded. Zephyr nodded. "The old man understands. In short, it is to stock up on this special recruit intern. Before he becomes a member of Marine, what he can learn is based on his ability." "Garp, you can't teach him anymore," Sengoku told Garp. "Okay." Garp grinned at Sengoku. "The old man has nothing to teach him anyway." The news that Marine hired an 11-year-old intern was still not completely concealed, and it was passed out. There is no such name as 4 Emperors in the current sea. But the reputation of some powerful pirate groups has been widely known. For example, the Whitebeard Pirates. Marine's special intern, an 11-year-old kid. Kahahaha. Whitebeard looked at the newspaper in his hand and couldn't help laughing. Sengoku, that staid and stubborn guy, can still do such a thing. Kuhahaha. He laughed and picked up the huge wine glass and poured it into his mouth. On the shore of a small island, a pirate ship and a small boat shaped like a coffin were docked. Suddenly, the sky sank, 2 huge slashes collided, and the entire sky above the island was instantly divided into 4. The duel between the captain and the Eagle Eye is as shocking as ever. Reiki Lu, a fat man wearing small sunglasses, sat on a rock and said while eating. Usopp, who do you think will win this time? The two of them never seemed to have a victory or defeat. Usopp wiped the spear in his hand. Above the heads of several people, the black sword air layer cut by the supremely sharp knife and black knife spread outward, and the sea around the island was violently turbulent. But this group of people are used to it. Next to him, Ben Beckman, the red-haired pirate captain with long gray hair and a cigar in his mouth, was lying on a rock and looked calmly at the newspaper in his hand. When he saw the message, his always calm face showed a look of surprise. Reiki Lu noticed this scene and couldn't help but curiously asked, "Deputy Captain, is there any news that you care about?" "Marine hired an intern specially," Beckman said. "Interns? Marine has interns now." Usopp was a little surprised. Interns are uncommon among the pirates, especially the big pirates. Shanks and Buggy were also interns of the Roger Pirates. But it was the first time I heard of the interns in Marine. "Is there anything special about that intern? Can be specially recruited by Marine?" Usopp asked curiously. "Very special," Beckman said. "It's a kid named Ron. He's very young, he seems to be only 11 years old." 11-year-old kid. Usopp and Lackey Pavement looked at each other. Beckman looked at the newspaper in his hand with a thought in his eyes. An 11-year-old kid can make the stubborn Marine Marshal Sengoku break the rules and recruit him as an intern. How special is this kid? Because Marine broke the old-fashioned rules and suddenly hired an intern, the name Ron appeared on the sea for the first time. But after all, it was just an 11-year-old kid. A few interested people secretly care. And more people disagree, just as Marine is doing some tricks. The news and the name did not cause any disturbances in the sea. In a flash, he was overwhelmed by other news on the sea. It was a flash in the pan, and soon disappeared in people's memory. Marine headquarters, Marineford. Smoker was lying in the ward by the window with his cigar in his mouth, with heavy gauze tied on his head, abdomen and right arm. "It's really ugly. I didn't expect you to be beaten so badly in the same class as Hina." Hina was very disappointed. With long sassy pale pink hair, wearing a red suit and a coat of justice, and a figure, Hina is standing in front of the Smoker hospital bed with a thin cigarette with her arms in her arms. "Who is it that beat you like this?" Hina is curious. Hina looked at Smoker and asked curiously. Smoker, as the capable person of Logia Smoke Fruit, is only strong or not weaker than she is, but I didn't expect to be beaten like this. And I heard that he seemed to be injured in Marineford, not because of the mission. Hina was curious about who moved her hand. "It has nothing to do with you, get out of here." Smoker looked out the window and said with a sullen face. "Humph." Hina looked at him with a cold snort, turned and left the ward. On the way back from the hospital, she inadvertently saw a black-haired boy in a white exercise suit walking with his eyes closed, arms outstretched, and barefoot on a long courtyard wall. It turned out to be quite steady. This is the intern who was specially recruited. He's really young. Hina looked at Ron and became interested. "What are you doing?" she asked him. "Practice." The boy closed his eyes. "Kaido. What can I exercise by doing this?" Hina was a little curious. She walked with him, but one was under the courtyard wall and the other was on the courtyard wall. Exercise feeling. Ron tried to exercise his feelings by walking with his eyes closed, thereby comprehending observation hockey. Hina didn't know his plan. At this time, hearing his answer, she couldn't help but smile as if it was a child messing around. "Your name is Ron, right?" "Okay, my name is Hina." Ron was slightly startled when he heard the name. Black Threshold Hina. So it was her. "Do you have something to eat?" Hina walked with her hands behind her back. "I like everything delicious." "Then, do you want to go shopping with Hina? Take you to eat delicious food." When Smoker in the ward looked out the window, he happened to see Hina and Ron walking together. His eyes couldn't help but shrink. That guy Hina, why would you walk with him? Could she already know? Smoker's eyes widened. If Hina knows, that means that the whole Marineford may know it. He, Smoker, was seriously injured by a child of 11 and was hospitalized. In fact, Hina doesn't even know this. She just intends to take this little boy who she has a good impression on to go shopping together. There is a store she wants to eat for a long time, and it seems that a new dessert will be launched. Only a few of them knew about the match between Smoker and Ron. Sengoku and the others will not expose Smoker's wounds. As long as Smoker and Ron didn't say anything, no one else would know, and after Smoker's injury healed, this matter would seem to have never happened. But now Smoker has misunderstood, and feels as if everyone already knows. Lying on the bed, Smoker with his cigar stared out the window blankly. After a long silence, he made a decision. After the injury is over, leave Marineford, no, leave the Grand Line. Find a place to stay. On an island near Marineford, Hina and Ron ate and drank all the way. Ron also temporarily gave up the idea of practicing, as a traveler, enjoying a variety of food and specialty drinks. The two of them had a lot of fun. But I don't know that Smoker is now ready to leave the Grand Line. After returning to Marineford's warship carrying a variety of food, desserts and clothes, Hina bent over and smiled at Ron. Hina likes you very much, little Ron, come to Hina's boat. Although she only got along for a long time, she really liked Ron, and she seemed to treat Ron as her younger brother. If Marine students who were at the same time with her saw this, they would be very surprised. That proud, cold, confident Hina would be so gentle and close to people. Ron shook his head. Hina, I'm not Marine yet, I can't be your subordinate. Really, Hina is sorry. Hina was a little disappointed, but still respected Ron's decision. Ron nodded and smiled at him. If there is a chance next time, I will go out to sea with you, Hina. Hina, who is over 1.8 meters tall, bent down and stroked his head with a smile. Okay. In the evening, after the warship docked, the two separated. Hina, wearing a coat of justice, stood on the deck and watched the little figure fade away, with a smile on her beautiful and moving face. Hina is now Lieutenant Junior grade, and there are still many missions to catch pirates at sea. Today is a rare time to rest. She heard that Smoker was injured, and originally wanted to come to see Smoker. Unexpectedly, I met the specially recruited intern who was rumored to be so funny and cute, completely separated from this serious and dull Marine headquarters style. It's like a touch of verdant green on a dull gray background wall, full of vitality, and involuntarily attracts the independent and highly individual Hina. Hina Lieutenant Junior grade, should we set off now? An adjutant asked behind Hina. Let's go. Hina turned around. See you next time, little Ron. Ron naturally didn't know Hina's thoughts. On the way back to his residence, he ran into another familiar person. Flying Squirrel Vice Admiral. Flying Squirrel also saw him, but just glanced at him, and passed him with Marine behind him. You can't go wrong. Ron turned his head and glanced at the tall and thin back. This guy's swordsmanship has definitely reached the realm of swordsmanship mentioned by Curator Koshiro. Plus armament hockey and observation hockey. I am definitely not his opponent now. Ron thought to himself as he walked on the road. The next period of time. Hina was busy performing the task, and Smoker immediately requested to be transferred after her injury improved. Ron usually walks barefoot on the wall to exercise his perception, or he goes to the Marine Headquarters building or Marine Academy. As long as he doesn't go to some confidential places, no one will stop him. Marine generals and soldiers were kind to him, but some coldly ignored him. Ron didn't care about it either. When I found out that there are a lot of mechanical equipment for exercise in Marine Academy, and I can see the scene of Marine freshmen practicing Marine 6 styles from time to time. Ron spent more time in Marine Academy. Soon, 1 month passed. This day, Marine Headquarters building. Is it enough to just leave it like this? Kizaru sat down, playing with his fingers. What? Sengoku sits behind the desk and handles the documents without looking up. That kid brought back by Mr. Garp. You said Ron, didn't he stay well at Marineford these days? It's quite comfortable to stay, but if he stays in Marineford, can he see the justice of our Marine? Kizaru said without looking up, the goal of making him an intern is that he hopes he can join in Marine, or do you just need to maintain your status as an intern? Porosalino, what do you want to say? Sengoku looked up at him. Kizaru stood up, put his hands in kabuto, and glanced at Sengoku with a smile under his sunglasses. I just think, he needs to see the evil of the pirate. Sengoku squinted his eyes slightly. Let's talk about it in detail. Kizaru walked out of Sengoku's office. Did not go far. He stopped. Is that all right, Teacher Zephyr? Zephyr, who was standing by the wall with his arms in his arms, hummed. Thanks a lot, Ms. Zephyr, can you talk to the marshal for this kind of thing yourself? Why do you want to find me specifically? Kizaru, with his hand in his trouser pocket, glanced at him and asked. Sengoku knows my killing intent and hatred for the pirates. If I go to say, he will think more about it. Zephyr said solemnly. It is rare to see Teacher Zephyr being so caring. It seems that you value that intern very much. Kizaru glanced at Zephyr and said. What's so special about that little guy named Ron? Or, what happened when we didn't know? Porosalino. Zephyr interrupted him, turned his back to him and said, I can't tell you a lot about him. You just need to remember, it doesn't matter whether he joins Marine or not, but if one day he shows signs of leaning against the pirates. Zephyr turned his head slightly and glanced at Kizaru. I hope you can wipe him out immediately. Kizaru turned his head slightly and glanced at Zephyr, who was full of seriousness behind him, with an iconic smile on his face. Ms. Zephyr, really terrible. After listening to Kizaru's words and suggestions, Sengoku called Vice Admiral Crane, Akainu Sakazuki who had just returned from the mission, and Garp who had nothing to do, and decided to discuss it. Let Ron get on Zephyr's boat. Garp was startled when he heard the words. Yes, it was Kizaru's proposal. I call you over this time to discuss whether it is feasible. Behind the table, Sengoku crossed his hands and placed it in front of him. It's boring, just call me over for this kind of thing, that kind of kid, whatever. Akainu Sakazuki said indifferently, with an extremely dismissive expression. Let him see the pirate's evil with his own eyes. Suru Vice Admiral thought for a while. Kizaru's proposal is really good. If he can see through the pirate's evil by Zephyr's side, and make up his mind to become a member of Marine early, he can also train Zephyr as soon as possible, so that he can grow into a powerful force that can support our Marine as soon as possible. I agree with this proposal. He Vice Admiral agreed. Sengoku nodded and looked at Garp. Garp, how about you? I don't have any opinion, but have you ever asked that kid if he wants to get on Zephyr's boat? Garp folded his arms and said, aren't you the one who said before that he didn't make any mandatory requirements? Then you can ask Garp for his opinion first. Old man again. Ron's place. Let me go to Zephyr's boat. Ron was a little surprised when he heard Garp's words. Sengoku asked the old man to ask if you would like it. Garp scratched his head and said, if you don't want to, you can choose not to go. Ron thought for a while, looked at Garp and asked, Old man, do you think I should go? I want the old man to say it. Garp looked at Ron before him and nodded. If you want to become stronger, you should go. Not to mention anything else. Just talk about Zephyr, he is the one who likes to teach potential juniors the most. Although his level of teaching is brutal, he is definitely top-notch. After getting on his boat and leaving Marineford, he will definitely be tempted to take the initiative to teach you. This is a great opportunity for you to improve. If you go to sea with him, you will definitely meet many powerful pirates. Fighting with them in actual combat can also sharpen your strength. After listening to Garp, Ron's eyes flickered slightly. Finally he nodded. Okay, I'll go. 3 days later. Zephyr came to his warship with Ron carrying the famous knife Reikiri. All the new Marines on board the warship. This is Ron. Zephyr introduced Ron to everyone. Is that the specially recruited intern? A beautiful girl with a slender figure and long curly hair with smooth sea blue waves, a long knife hung around her waist, looked at Ron with curiosity. See Ron's eyes cast towards her. She smiled at him and said, my name is Ai Yin, and I am a disciple of Teacher Zephyr. I'm Bins. Bins, who was dressed like a ninja next to him, pointed to himself. Ron had a bit of an impression of the two of them. After Zephyr rebelled against Marine, the two of them have never left. Now, are you a swordsman? Ai Yin saw Reikiri behind Ron and asked curiously. Ron nodded. Not far away. Sure enough, he's a kid, just like the rumors. Why does Teacher Zephyr want this kind of specially recruited kid to act with us? A Marine freshman looked at Ron not far away with his arms in his arms, somewhat dissatisfied. Shioji, let's just say a few words less. If Teacher Zephyr hears, we will definitely punish us. But I'm not wrong. What can such a kid do when he comes to this ship? Didn't he get in because of his relationship? Marine, who called Shuji, said angrily, "We are going to deal with a vicious pirate this time, but we don't have the intention to take care of and protect such a kid. You seem to be very dissatisfied with my decision, Shuji." A familiar voice sounded behind him. It made him stiff. The companion next to him broke out in a cold sweat, looking at the tall and burly figure and said, Teacher Zephyr." Although Shioji was also very scared and his hands were trembling, he looked at the little ghost who was talking with Ai Yin in the distance. He still gritted his teeth and turned around, looking directly at the teacher Zephyr who he most feared and respected in front of him, and said, "Yes. Teacher Zephyr, I think it is totally wrong to let such a kid go on a boat with us to fight against the pirates. The right decision. When we fight the pirates for their lives, that kind of guy will only be a burden." Zephyr, with short purple hair and sunglasses, hugged his arms, looked down at his resentful new student, and said blankly, "Legacy. Don't think too much, idiot, his strength is far above you." Shioji was taken aback for a moment, and then he was full of disbelief. "The strength of that kid is better than me. How can? You can try." After hearing Zephyr's plain words, Shuji couldn't help gritting his teeth. He clenched his fists, turned around and walked over there despite the dissuasion of his companions. "Your name is Ron, right?" Ron raised his head, and a burly young marine stood in front of him, lowered his head, and fixed his eyes on him. "Fight me." Ayan frowned. "Shioji, what are you talking about?" "Ayan, this matter has nothing to do with you." Shuji didn't even look at him, just staring at Ron. "The people on this ship are gambled on their lives to fight the pirates. I will never allow a burden who has no strength and needs protection from others to board the ship." "I see." Ron nodded. "Then come and fight." After a while. In addition to the two outstanding demon fruit powers of Ain and Bins, the freshmen of this Marine 6 styles have already mastered. Marine 6 styles is lying on the deck of the warship with a face full of disbelief. All the Marine freshmen around except Zephyr were stunned, looking at the tiny figure in disbelief. Shuji was defeated. This is too fast, he is the master Marine 6 styles. It's not a person with fruit ability, just use physical skills to defeat Shuji in 10 moves, sigh. The strength of that special enrollment kid, so strong. Unexpectedly, Ron is so strong, he deserves to be a specially recruited intern. Ai Yin recovered from the shock, looked at the little figure, and said with a flash of warfare in his eyes. "Ms. Zephyr, can I compete with him?" "Yes, but fruit power is not allowed." Zephyr glanced at her. "Learn." Ai Yin kicked his feet and rushed into the court. Shave. She flashed in shape, appeared in front of Ron, raised her foot and kicked at him. Ron raised his arm and caught the kick abruptly. What a strong power this small body is. Ai Yin was a little shocked. But the action didn't stop. His body swirled in the air, and a sharp slash hit Ron's head. Ron's eyes narrowed slightly, and his right foot lifted straight up, hitting her bottom hard from top to bottom. Ai Yin's slender figure was hit upward by the strong force. The wooden board under Ron's feet was also crushed. Ain used the moonwalk in Marine 6 styles, stayed in midair, and then lifted his leg to split. Tempest kick. Accompanied by the sharp air friction sound, an extremely sharp white chopping wave hit Ron below. It's worthy of being the strongest Ain of our class this time, and the 6 forms is already so familiar with the master. Someone sighed. And swordsmanship, which is also the strongest among us. Don't forget, she is still a fruitful person. No matter how strong the intern kid is, it shouldn't be her opponent. The Marine freshman onlookers talked a lot. But in the next second, a scene that silenced everyone appeared. Facing the white chopping wave that smashed down. The black-haired boy named Ron also raised his foot and swung his whip in the air. A white chopping wave that was longer and wider than Ai Yin rushed out. Destroyed the tempest kick that Ai Yin used, and rushed in front of Ai Yin in the air. What? Ai Yin was shocked. It was too late to dodge, so he had to keep his hands in front of him. Iron body. She used the iron body with both arms and took the blow. Although she was not injured, she was pushed back a long way, and she was about to rush out of the warship and fall into the sea. Bins, who possessed lush fruits, hurriedly used his abilities to allow a plant vine to spread quickly, engulfing Ayan in the air, and pulling her back. Many Marine freshmen couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. But more of them were staring at Ron, who retracted his leg in shock. That was Tempest Kick. That guy is also the master of Marine 6 styles. Zephyr stared at Ron, and his heart was shaking at the moment. That's definitely Tempest Kick. Doesn't Sengoku not allow anyone to teach him Marine 6 styles? Why does he still learn Tempest Kick? Is it Garp? No, although Garp likes to mess around, he doesn't mess around with big things. Zephyr remembered that when he was training these freshmen at Marine Academy, there was always a small figure watching in the distance. An astonishing thought flashed in his mind for an instant. Could it be that? Did he learn just by watching? Zephyr walked up to Ron, looked at him and said, "Ron, come with me." 2 figures, one large and one small, left the deck, leaving all Marine freshmen in shock. Inside the warship, in Zephyr's room, very simple, except for some documents on the desk, there is only a phone bug and a photo, and the bed quilt is neatly folded. Zephyr, wearing sunglasses, sat in a chair and looked at Ron standing in front of him with Reikiri on his back. The one you just used is definitely Tempest Kick from Marine 6 styles. Can you tell me how you learned it? Zephyr asked curiously. Ron didn't have anything to hide, and said to him, I learned it when I watched you teach them at Marine Academy. As long as you think about the principle, it's actually quite simple. It's pretty simple. The corner of Zephyr's eyes twitched. How long did he study the 6 forms? It seems that it takes 5 or 6 years to be a master. Even the 3 monsters of Kizaru Aokiji Akainu never said that Marine 6 styles is simple. However, thinking of the power and speed of this little guy in front of him, even Haki is the master of the enchanting level. He said Marine 6 styles is simple. You can learn Tempest Kick in Marine 6 styles just by looking at it. It doesn't seem to be too incredible. Marine 6 styles, how many have you learned? Tempest Kick and shaving, but shaving is a bit harder than Tempest Kick, and you still can't master the master. Ron said truthfully, have you even learned how to shave? This kid has only been to Marineford for less than 2 months, right? Zephyr didn't know what to say. He picked up the water glass on the table and took a drink. But he calmed down, and after thinking about it, he felt that it seemed normal. To practice Marine 6 styles, physique is the foundation. The foundation of Tempest Kick is strength and speed, and the foundation of Tempest Kick is speed. And the strength and speed of this kid had long been achieved. As long as you see the principle, plus a lot of practice, it is not impossible to reach the master's level quickly. He glanced at Ron. Marine 6 styles seems to be really simple to this kid. Do you want to learn all Marine 6 styles? Zephyr lowered his water glass and asked. It was beyond his expectation. Ron shook his head. No, I just want to learn Tempest Kick, shave and moonwalk. It's too greedy to chew. This sentence is the essence. Zephyr became more and more surprised at the black-haired boy in front of him. For moonwalk, you only need to convert your strength into foot strength and burst out in the air instantly. You should be able to do it with your current strength. Zephyr casually told Ron the principles and know-how of moonwalk. Ron's eyes moved slightly. Sure enough, it was the same as Garp said. Zephyr can't help teaching people he thinks has potential. Observation Haki, is it the master? No, not yet. Ron shook his head. Really? Zephyr nodded. After all, observation Haki is different from armament Haki. Most people awaken to observation Haki after experiencing some kind of strong stimulus that can greatly affect their emotions. You are still young, I am afraid that you have not experienced it. Don't worry too much. I know. That's good. Zephyr looked at his immature face and nodded. Looking at those clear and calm eyes, he couldn't help turning his head and glanced at the photo on the table. The woman in the photo is holding a baby who is still in swaddling, smiling brightly. Ron, have you killed anyone? Zephyr asked suddenly. Ron hummed. The old man is called the Zephyr Oftenot Kill, countless pirates who have fought against in his life, but the irony is that the old man's family was killed by the pirates. Zephyr said in a low voice, I hate pirates. Ron was silent. The old man is old, not as good as when he was young. The crusade against the pirates is already a bit difficult. But now the pirates in the sea are more powerful and lawless than before. The evil they have done is enough to fill it up. The whole sea. Zephyr clenched his fists, and his tone was full of hatred for the pirate and unwillingness to grow old. He took off his sunglasses and looked at Ron, his eyes very solemn and serious. Boy Ron, your potential is so great that the old man has never seen it before. If you are willing to join Marine, the old man is willing to give you a lesson. In less than 5 years, you will definitely become more than 10 times stronger than now. 10 years later, you feel that you can become the youngest admiral in Marine's history. Ron shook his head. I don't plan to consider this for the time being. Zephyr's face sank, and he stood up abruptly. He put on his sunglasses and looked down at Ron. Suddenly, a strong sense of pressure fell on Ron's shoulders instantly. Then I will let you take a good look at the evil of the pirate, and then you can decide whether or not to consider it. Zephyr strode out of the house. Soon, the warship left the harbor and sailed out of Marineford. Marine Headquarters Building. Sengoku and Suru stood by the railing, looking at the warship that was leaving. Zephyr has been too paranoid about the pirates' methods over the years. I don't know if anything will happen, Crane said with some worry. Although Zephyr is old and not as strong as when he was young, it is still my Marine Headquarters Admiral Black Arm Zephyr after all. Sengoku, wearing a marine hat, hugged his arms and said, there should be no pirates crazy enough to provoke him. I hope so. Zephyr's warship left Marineford and sailed on the vast ocean. Marine freshmen performed their duties in an orderly manner. Others exercised on the deck and competed. Ayan, who was unwilling to lose last time, approached Ron again and wanted to compete with him again. Going to continue to be familiar with shaving, Ron of Moonwalk and Tempest Kick couldn't ask for this suitable and seductive sparring partner. After 7 days of competition, Ron was completely familiar with shaving and Tempest Kick, and even Moonwalk had some clues. Soon, the warship arrived at an island occupied and controlled by a pirate regiment. This is the Guisho Pirates. The leader of the Guisho is Demon Fruit Power, with a reward of 37 million Baileys. Zephyr spoke to the marine freshmen who wrapped Ain, Bins, and Shuji in front of him. Your mission is to completely destroy the Ghost Hand pirate group. You can't let a pirate go. Did you hear it clearly? Zephyr rushed to the front of the line, and the people standing straight behind their hands were stern. Listen clearly, Teacher Zephyr. Okay, let's go now. Ron, come with you too. Yin and other marine freshmen disembarked first with weapons. Zephyr walked behind with Ron and several adjutants. Some troops were also left behind on the warship. Dip, it is detected that the host is located on Sigley Island. It is possible to sign in. Do you sign in? Sign in. Sign in is successful. Get sign in reward. Vitality plus 10. With the strength and weaponry of Yin and others, it is not difficult to deal with the pirate group that offers 37 million rewards. Zephyr took Ron into the island controlled by the pirate group without taking a shot. A large number of ragged and scrawny civilians are digging in the mine. The women are like cattle, and there are also many underage girls who are covered in only a layer of rags, and their skin is full of bruises, and their eyes are dull. Is this what you want to show me? Ron's indifferent voice sounded behind Zephyr. It's not just these. Zephyr pointed to the distance. The pirates fought back frantically before being caught. Especially the captain of the Ghost Hand pirate ship, using the power of devil fruit, his hands became like the hands of the devil. After being cut by Ain's Tempest Kick, he grabbed the companion next to him and begged for mercy in spite of his despair. Directly pierced the sharp claws into its body, and used the fruit's ability to absorb its blood to restore itself. Betrayal, cruel, cold-blooded, crazy, this is the pirate, this is the evil in this world. Zephyr looked over there, his cold tone full of disgust. Ron glanced at the battlefield over there, then looked at the desperate and numb civilians around him, and finally his eyes fell on Zephyr's tall back, and said coldly, I did see the evil of the pirates, but at the same time I also saw the incompetence of Marine. Zephyr turned his head slowly and stared at Ron. Marines, incompetent. If it wasn't for Marine's incompetence, why could this kind of pirate be allowed to do evil on this island for so long? Ron stared at Zephyr unceremoniously. Isn't Marine claiming the justice of the sea? Why does it make these people so desperate and numb? Isn't it letting down their hopes again and again? Don't say anything that is not clear about the situation. Even the stable life of ordinary people on such a small island can't be protected. Let such pirates do evil here for so long. Isn't Marine incompetent? Or, Marine has long been incompetent. I know, but I don't see it. Don't you think it's worth sending troops and warships to such small islands and hundreds of civilians? Ron was unusually angry. It is not only for these evil pirates, but also for the incompetent Marine. He remembered the small island where he had just come to this world. The two islands are about the same size, and the number of people on the islands is about the same. Both are towns with a few hundred people. If that small island also becomes like this, those who are familiar and close to them will become this tragic situation. Ron was furious just thinking about it. After listening to Ron, Zephyr was silent for a long time. Marine may indeed be incompetent. The old man cannot refute this. But the old man can guarantee that Marine will never turn a blind eye and refuse to send soldiers. The reason why we can know the situation of this island is that a person on this small island flees desperately before passing the news, and we also know what happened. These words don't need to be explained to me. Ron walked past him. I only believe what my eyes see. As Ron walked to the battlefield, he slowly pulled out Reikiri from his back. The killing intent in the body was silent. He Gia, as long as there is blood around me, I will never lose. The hideous ghost hand waved a pair of giant blood and black demon hands, then threw away a sucked corpse and killed it with a grinning grin at Ai Yin. Ai Yin jumped back to avoid the blow. Grow and grow. Bins danced a weird dance of growth, using fruit power, vines entwined towards the ghost hand. But he was pulled to pieces by those terrifying giant hands of the demon. Tempest kick. Ein was another tempest kick. The ghost hand blocked him with a giant hand. Although the white slashing wave cut the wound on the giant hand, it was quickly repaired by wisps of blood. He Gia, it's useless. The ghost hand grinned at Ai Yin. Your attack is useless to me, but I only have to touch you and you are done. I haven't tasted the blood of the beautiful marine girl yet, sizzle. Ain squeezed the sword in his hand, a tricky color flashed in his eyes. Her fruit ability needs to touch that guy's body. But if you get close to him, you will be touched by his demon hands, and your blood will be sucked away. And, her current fruiting ability can only set him back 3 years at most. If you want him to lose the ability to fight, I'm afraid you need to touch him many times. This guy really only has the strength of 37 million Pele. Die. The ghost hand waved the huge demon's right hand and grabbed Ai Yin with a strong blood. Ai Yin gritted her teeth slightly, squeezed the handle of the knife with both hands, and was about to fight him. Get out of the way. A calm voice rang in her ears. Then she saw a small figure passing by her, holding Reikiri shining with thunder, and walking towards the ghost hand waving the right hand of the huge demon. Ron. Ai Yin's eyes widened slightly, and then he seemed to react, and immediately shouted, be careful with his hands, don't touch. Hockey, twist. The breath of the sun, the 9-shaped setting sun turned around. After whispering in a low voice, Ron appeared in midair for a moment, standing upside down. With the invisible hockey entwined in his hands, Reikiri, who was blazing like the sun, cut out in the air. Ai Yin saw an arc-shaped slash that looked like a golden thread flashing away. Next second, a strong wave of hot air stirred her hair. Boom! The hands of those huge ferocious demons hit the ground heavily. Ai Yin looked dull. Me, my hand, my hand. Before Guizhou could realize what was happening, a sharp pain struck him suddenly, and he realized that his arms had disappeared and he was cut off by Qi General. A fiery flame ignited at the fracture, and the pain of burning the wound was simply unbearable. Ron, who fell to the ground from midair, didn't even see the horror of the ghost hand. With a blank expression on his face, he returned the sword to its sheath, and in Ai Yin's shocked and dull eyes, as if nothing had happened, he stepped towards the warship. All the members of the Guizhou pirate group including the Guizhou were arrested to appease the tortured and humiliated civilians on the island. After recording the location of the island with the record pointer, the warship slowly left the island. Inside Zephyr's house, Ein reports to Zephyr. Zephyr was recording, and after listening to Ai Yin's description of the ghost hand ability, Zephyr frowned slightly. According to what you said, the strength of the ghost hand is definitely more than 37 million Bailey's bounty. Teacher, I went to check. The amount of reward offered by Guizhou was 4 years ago and has not been updated for 4 years. Ai Yin said, in 4 years, has the fruit ability been developed further? This is not surprising. At this point, Zephyr took off his sunglasses and pinched his eyebrows with a hint of annoyance in his tone. Unexpectedly, I haven't noticed what this ghost pirate ship is doing for 4 years. Marine is really the same as that kid said, becoming more and more incompetent. Teacher, How much bounty can almost reach that ghost hand's current strength? Ai Yin asked. According to your description, his current strength can reach at least 60 million Baileys. 60 million Bailey. Ayan was a little shocked. The pirate leader with a bounty of close to 60 million, but Ron's boycott his arms in a single blow. It's really unexpected. It turns out that his strongest is swordsmanship. Zephyr couldn't help sighing. Listening to his sigh, Ai Yin's expression was complicated, and Chunin couldn't help but that amazing cut appeared in his mind. If you hadn't seen it with your own eyes, it would be hard to believe that the slash came from an 11-year-old boy. What is he doing now? Zephyr looked at Ayn and asked. I saw him practicing shaving on the deck when I came. How is it? It seems to be the same as before. Zephyr nodded when he heard this. I see, you go back first. Yes. After Ai Yin left, Zephyr took out the phone worm and headed to Marine headquarters. Sengoku, this is Zephyr. Zephyr, what's the matter? Sengoku's voice came from the phone worm, and his attitude was fairly mild. I want you to send some troops to station on an island. What happened? Zephyr told Sengoku the whole thing. After Sengoku listened, he was silent for a while. This is indeed our Marine's negligence, but since the pirates have been caught, there is no need to send troops. No need. Marine's major negligence has caused them to completely lose their trust. Shouldn't they be remedied in time to make these people who have been insulted believe in justice again? Zephyr annoyed. Sengoku's voice became low. Zephyr, we Marine don't have too many troops now. If we station troops on each of these remote small islands, how can we maintain justice and suppress the increasing number of pirates in the entire sea? Sengoku, I know, there is a lot of extra Marine stationed in Mariajoy. Before Zephyr finished speaking, Sengoku's cold voice rang in the phone bug. Zephyr, needless to say, the troops stationed in the world government are never allowed to be mobilized. Since the internship is over, please bring someone back. Sengoku. You have no civilians in your eyes, only the world government. Zephyr gritted his teeth and hit the corner of the table with a fist, instantly breaking the corner of the table. When on that island, what the black-haired boy said to him echoed in his mind again. I did see the evil of the pirates, but at the same time I also saw the incompetence of Marine. The next few days, the warship returned along another route towards Marineford. Passed through 3 islands one after another. After Ron checked in one by one, his vitality finally broke through the 700-point mark. Moonwalk was also successfully displayed for the first time. Besides, Ron also has a silver revolver on his body, which is an extra reward for signing in. It is produced by the system and has unlimited bullets. Although he loves it very much, he still put it in the system space for the time being. In addition to a large amount of treasures and money in the system space, there are some clothing, fur, and various fine wines. Ron was not willing to drink the bottles of wine that Makino gave. Fortunately, the system space is large enough, otherwise these are really not stored and carried. Ron, who was lying on the railing, left the system space intently, opened his eyes, and saw the endless blue sea. Looking at the sea in front of me. Feel the sea breeze gently blowing on the hair. Leaning his arms on the railing, Ron's eyes flashed a rare loneliness. I don't know how Mars, Daddy Harris and Aunt Mary, Uncle Brian are doing. Makino and Ace Luffy are okay. Has Kuina become stronger now? What are you thinking about? A sweet female voice rang beside Ron. Ron turned his head. Ai Yin, with blue curly hair and a black cloak, walked towards him. Nothing. He retracted his gaze. Ai Yin walked to him, put his arm on the railing, and looked at him and said. Liar, I see the look in your eyes just now seems to be thinking. Could it be that you are thinking of your little girlfriend in your hometown? Certainly not. The two stood together. The top of Ron's head only reached her shoulders. Last time, thank you for helping me. Ai Yin looked at the Deheidao in front of him. It doesn't count as helping you, but I was in a bad mood at the time and wanted to find something to chop. Gluck, this is really the cause of willfulness. Hearing this, Ai Yin smiled lightly and said, if you let the guy who was hacked by you know, you will definitely be angry to death. Ron sneered, that kind of guy is already considered good without a single blow. Makes sense. Ai Yin placed her chin on her arm on the railing, turned her head to look at Ron and said, where did you learn swordsmanship? a kendo field called East Shindojo, on a small island in East Blue. Just when Ron was chatting with Ayan, Shuji and one of his companions went to the place where the members of the Guisho pirates were held, and conducted routine inspections to prevent any errors. Just when the two passed the cage where the ghost hand was held. With both arms severed, the ghost hands bound with iron ropes looked at the two Jia Yin and smiled. He Jia. You dare to arrest Laozi, do you know who is Laozi's subordinate? You are bad, but the Lord's good deeds. The Lord. Shioji's brows condensed, and he looked at the ghost in the cage and said, so there is someone above you. Who is that person? He Jia, you will know soon. He Jia. Shioji felt a little uneasy, and immediately went to Zephyr to report the matter. The people on the ghost hand pirate group. Zephyr's eyes condensed. Immediately he remembered two pieces of news he had previously learned from civilians on that island. The ghost hand pirate group hasn't left in 4 years. They ordered the residents of the island to mine some kind of iron ore. Combine these two messages. Zephyr made a judgment in an instant. The Guisho pirates must be ordered by the people above, and only stayed on this island for 4 years, blocking all internal and external news. The purpose is to let the people on this island mine some kind of iron ore for them. The talent above is the master of this incident. Zephyr had an ominous premonition in his heart. He looked towards Shojidao. Shioji, immediately notify, speed up, and return to Marineford at full speed. Yes, the warship accelerated towards Marineford. What everyone on the warship didn't know at this moment was, in the air hundreds of miles behind the warship, a figure was flying and moving at high speed among the clouds, chasing towards the warship. Then we're done, we will fight my swordsmanship tomorrow. Ayan smiled at Ron. She knew that her swordsmanship was not Ron's opponent. But if he can compete with him in swordsmanship, he must also be able to improve. Then I'll go ahead. Okay. After Ayan left, Ron looked at the sea for a while, and then turned around to go back to the house. And just now, there was a sudden coldness in his heart. This is killing intent. Ron turned his head abruptly. At a glance, I saw a figure above the sky in the distance quickly approaching here. Accompanied by a sharp sound penetrating the air. A transparent line fell from the air onto the warship. In the next second, the figure fell onto the warship from a high altitude at a speed that was hard to see with the naked eye. When Ron pulled out Reikiri, the figure had fallen on the railing at the top of the back of the warship. Zephyr's tall and burly body also appeared beside Ron. Two powerful auras fell on Ron's shoulders almost at the same time. Zephyr, long time no see. The figure in a pink feather coat, cropped trousers, and sunglasses crouched on the railing, looking at Zephyr with a smile. 7 warlords of the sea, Doflamingo. Zephyr, who was standing next to Ron, stared at the extremely dangerous guy in front of him and said solemnly, "You guy, what do you want to do here?" Ain and Binz also brought a group of Marines to the place with weapons at this time, looking at the Doflamingo standing on the railing with shocked eyes. That guy is. Cold sweat dripped from Binz's forehead. Heavenly Yaksha, Doflamingo, one of the 7 warlords of the sea. Why is he here? Yin squeezed the knife in his hand and stared at Doflamingo. From him, she felt endless malice and danger. Obviously this 7 warlords of the sea appeared here. It didn't come with any kindness. You arrested my person, but don't you know what I want to do? Doflamingo stared at Zephyr with a cold face and said, "Hand over the ghosts, them and mine, Zephyr." What he was talking about was the special iron ore that Zephyr took away from that island. Wishful thinking. Zephyr unbuttoned his wrist, rolled up his sleeves, and stared at Doflamingo in front of him. He said coldly, "It seems that you are the top of the ghosts. Relying on the title of 7 warlords of the sea, do you think you can do anything wrong? It's better that the old man arrest you and go back for a good interrogation." Zephyr, I never thought that a stubborn old guy like you would also tell jokes. Wearing a pair of extremely arrogant sunglasses, Doflamingo smiled and slowly raised his hand. Suddenly, a chill of ultimate suddenly appeared in the hearts of Yin and other Marine students. Catch me, take these students you love, how do you do it? Boom, a Marine didn't hold back, driven by that inexplicable fear, he fired a shot at Doflamingo. Doflamingo flicked his finger. The lead bullet was split in half instantly in midair. The Marine student's neck was pierced by an invisible attack instantly, and blood gushed out. With the falling of the Marine, Zephyr's eyes widened instantly, his pupils shrank sharply, and he roared in rage. Doflamingo, you are looking for death. His figure disappeared instantly and appeared in front of Doflamingo. Armament Hockey's hardened fist slammed at him. Hey, this is your guy who shot me first, Zephyr. Cobweb. Laughing wildly, Doflamingo opened his hands, and countless thin threads were woven into a spider web to block Zephyr's furious punch. The two forces collided, the wind was overflowing, the warships were shaken, and the sea was rolling around. Soon, Zephyr's fist broke through the web, and Doflamingo kicked his feet and jumped into the air to avoid the blow. So old, but still have such strength, Black Arm Zephyr really deserves its reputation. Doflamingo jumped into the air and smiled at Zephyr, it's just that you still can't protect these students you love. Quote. He spread his 5 fingers towards the warship below. Ron's eyes condensed, and he sternly said to Ai Yin and the others behind him, retreat all. But it was too late. A sharp white line fell from the sky above Doflamingo's fingertips. In an instant, several Marine students who hadn't realized what was happening were penetrated and cut off. Blood spurts out. Ron waved Raikiri in his hand, and swung several volley slashes one after another, cutting off some white lines that had fallen on the crowds. That kid. Doflamingo saw this scene, staring at Ron, his eyes narrowed slightly under his sunglasses. Doflamingo, you are looking for death. Accompanied by Zephyr's furious voice, he stepped on the moonwalk and came to Doflamingo, slamming it to the warship with a punch. Tempest kick. Grow and grow. Ain and Binz attacked at the same time. A few white lines passed by. The attack of the two was broken in an instant, and the white line slashed towards the two without abating. Zephyr fell in front of them in time, and Armament Hockey's hardened palm blocked it and tore it off. Doflamingo walked out of the collapsed building, his expression extremely cold and unreliable. Zephyr, you angered me. Doflamingo spread his 5 fingers, raised his head and looked at the Marines such as Zephyr and Ai Yin. He chuckled and said, I have decided. I will kill all of your beloved students. Zephyr didn't intend to talk nonsense with him, he planned to do it. And just when he was about to do it, several gunshots and the sound of a long knife swinging down came from behind him. Zephyr let out a painful grunt. Those gunshots and long knife attacks turned out not to be towards Doflamingo, but all fell on his back. Teacher. Ain and Binz's expressions changed dramatically. Ron frowned, too. The people in Shuzichong roared, what are you doing? Those Marine students who attacked Zephyr were even more terrified and panicked. Sorry teacher. My body is out of control, stop. Leave me, stay away from me. No, do not want. While the Marine students cried and cried, they began to attack their surrounding companions indiscriminately. This is really wonderful. Zephyr, how does it feel to be attacked by one of his beloved students? Doflamingo looked at Zephyr and smiled. Zephyr, who had received 4 shots and 3 stab wounds, stared at him, gritted his teeth. Go to hell. Doflamingo raised his hand, and several white lines cut towards the injured Zephyr. Although Zephyr raised his arm-colored hardened arm to block it, he was still pushed back several meters. Doflamingo stretched out his finger again, and more lines fell on the remaining Marine students, controlling them to kill each other. It's really a wonderful scenery. Doflamingo is full of enjoyment. Stop. Zephyr really couldn't stand it anymore. Holding this old and injured body, he slew towards Doflamingo. But soon, some Marines controlled by Doflamingo blocked him. Some attacked him, some aimed their weapons at themselves. It doesn't matter if all of your beloved students die. Zephyr. Doflamingo's devilish voice rang in Zephyr's ears, and he looked at these familiar faces full of panic, fear and tears, and his whole body was shaking constantly. He couldn't watch them die. The corner of Doflamingo's mouth evoked an arc of evil cold blood, and his figure appeared in front of Zephyr in a flash, raising his foot and kicking him. Leg shave string. The breath of thunder, the shape of one, a thunderbolt. Accompanied by a thunder that tore through the air, the golden thunder light flashed on the deck of the warship. Doflamingo took it between his feet, and the sharp white line tangent to Zephyr was cut off in an instant. A long knife wrapped in golden thunder and lightning blocked Doflamingo's kick at Zephyr's foot. Doflamingo looked at the black-haired boy whose hair was flying in the strong wind while holding a long knife in front of him to block his blow, and his eyes narrowed slightly. Oh, Ron, with black hair on his forehead fluttering lightly, raised his eyes and stared at Doflamingo in front of him. The enemy in front of him is definitely the strongest one he has encountered so far. First heard that Marine hired a very young intern. It should be you, kid, what's your name? Doflamingo retracted his leg and looked down at Ron. Ron didn't speak, but just glanced at the Marine students who were controlled by Doflamingo's lines, holding a knife and slashing in the air, cutting off all those lines. Doflamingo squinted slightly, and his gaze flicked over rapier in Ron's hand. Boy, you have a good knife, how about show me? He stretched out his hand towards Ron. A few thin invisible white threads around him entangled towards him. Doflamingo wanted to capture this kid whose strength was beyond his surprise. He can be specially recruited by Marine as an intern and will follow Zephyr. With such a famous sword and strength, Marine must be highly valued. If you catch him, use it as a bargaining chip with Marine. Doflamingo thought of this, his eyes under the sunglasses flashed, and the speed at which he grabbed Ron suddenly increased. Hockey, harden. Ron held the handle of the knife with both hands, his eyes sharp. Facing the powerful enemy in front of him that surpassed his current stage, his heart was extremely calm at this moment, and all the sounds and details around him appeared in his mind. The complete concentration of sun-breathing method. Breath of flame 5 types. Yanhu. He moved towards Doflamingo's grabbed hand and swiped a giant slash like a burning tiger. The subtle silk threads around him were burned as soon as he approached Ron. Doflamingo felt the hockey and power contained in this slash, his face changed slightly. Seeing that his hand was about to be cut off by this cut. Doflamingo's 5 fingers formed into claws, armament hockey wrapped around, and one claw was torn out forward. 5 color strings. 5 lines of different colors collided with the giant slash that condensed into a burning tiger. After only a stalemate for a few seconds, Ron's slash was torn apart, and the 5 color strings trend continued towards Ron. It can be seen the strength gap between the two at this time. But in Ron's eyes at this moment, the speed of the 5 threads that were quickly cut towards him seemed to have slowed down, and a lot of details were fed back to his mind, including the sharpness, toughness, speed, and the killing intent and maliciousness of the 5 threads. Wait. Can be cut. At this moment, falling into that kind of strange state, a gleam of light flashed in the depths of Ron's pupils, whose perception ability had doubled. He lifted the rapier in his hand, and the crimson flames like the flames of the sun slowly spiraled along the hilt towards the blade. It was just a second before he was about to cut out the blow. A pitch-black iron fist blasted away the 5 color strings tangent to Ron. While Ron entangled Doflamingo for a while, Zephyr, who had disabled all Marine disciples, used the shaver to come to Ron. With short purple hair and taking off his sunglasses, he stared at Doflamingo closely. His whole body was bloody and hurt, but his aura was amazing. The eyes staring at Doflamingo boiled with murderous intent, like a tiger that only needs to eat people. Step back, Ron, leave it to the old man next. Zephyr raised a pair of dark arms and stared at Doflamingo, blocking Ron in front of him. Ron looked at the injury behind his back and wanted to say something. Zephyr said in a low voice, "The old man is not old enough to need your help from a kid, get out of here." After he finished speaking, he stomped heavily on his feet, displayed an extremely accomplished shave, and instantly came to Doflamingo and slammed his fist down. The entire warship was shaken. Faced with Zephyr, armament hockey's furious punch was implied. Doflamingo was directly punched from this side of the warship to the other side of the warship, penetrating an unknown number of iron plates. Cough. A mouthful of bright red blood spurted from Doflamingo's mouth. The shadows fell from the sky, and under Doflamingo's arrogant sunglasses, his pupils shrank rapidly. Boom. Zephyr fell from above with 1 foot. The warship sank, and then leaned toward this end, and the sea on both sides shook violently. Doflamingo, who was able to avoid the blow, stood on the swaying warship, bleeding from the corner of his mouth, staring at the slowly rising Zephyr. Is this the strength of Marine Admiral, Black Arm Zephyr? It really is not a vain name. Zephyr, with his thick and burly arms and completely black, said nothing, but locked him with murderous intent and aura. A drop of cold sweat dripped from Doflamingo's forehead. Hey, it seems that I angered a tiger today. He fell silent. The warship shook again. Zephyr disappeared in place. Before Doflamingo could react, he was kicked out by a leg from the side. Once again penetrated the warship. Just when he was about to be kicked into the sea, Doflamingo gritted his teeth and connected the railing of the warship with a silk thread, pulling back his figure that was about to fall into the sea. As soon as he returned to the warship, Doflamingo immediately performed his current strongest trick. Super Strike Whip. In an instant, with the command of Doflamingo's 10 hands, countless slender and sharp white lines were cut to the entire surrounding area. Zephyr appeared in the air in front of him, just as his dark fist containing terrifying power was about to fall. Doflamingo let out another arrogant laugh. Hey, Zephyr, my life and the lives of your beloved students, take it as you choose. Zephyr's pupils shrank, and Observation Hockey instantly sensed the situation there. With his punch now, he could indeed kill Heavenly Yaksha in front of him, but over there, he might die again. Zephyr made the choice without hesitation. He gave up on killing Doflamingo in front of him, but quickly returned to rescue his students. Looking at this scene, severely injured Doflamingo smiled more and more wildly and proudly. Hey, Zephyr, a strong man like you is also involved in so-called feelings. Let these worthless wastes become your weakness. This is really ridiculous. Ron, Ain and others are on the deck where Marine lives. Ron looked at the white thread cut from all directions and felt the dangerous aura contained in it. His eyes were dignified and he squeezed the handle of Reikiri's knife. Armament Hockey hardened directly and wrapped it around the knife. Is Doflamingo's full blow. Now he is not sure that he can take it. Ain took the lead. Tempest Kick. Her Tempest Kick couldn't cut those white lines at all, but was directly chopped. With a pale face, Yin gritted his teeth and blocked the other Marine freshman, drew the sword from his waist, and cut it out against the dozen white lines that were cut towards this side. Kang Wolf. A blue sword aura condensed by sword power rushed out. But it was shredded instantly. The sword in Yin's hand was also cut into several pieces. She opened her eyes wide, and the white lines in her pupils quickly enlarged. Ayan, get out of the way. Binz yelled anxiously. But at this moment, Yin had no time to dodge. Just now. The breath of the wind, the type of 3. Qinglin Fengshu. A loud shout exploded behind Yin. Immediately, 3 violent slashes of cyan were accompanied by turbulent winds toward the white silk threads that looked like Shinigami sickles. The two sides were deadlocked for a moment. Just when the white silk thread was cut again, a pair of dark and burly fists wrapped in the momentum that could smash the mountains and smashed down fiercely. The sharp white silk thread was smashed away in an instant. Good job, Ron boy. Zephyr's stalwart and tall figure appeared beside Yin. Teacher Zephyr. Binz couldn't help but burst into tears. After walking in front of death, Yin's legs fell softly and sat down. Ron, who was behind her, also let out a long sigh of relief. And just now, a feeling of cold came out of him again. Where? Ron turned around alertly. A thread glowing with blood came out of a dead Marine newborn, bounced silently, and then, like Lion Majesty, stabbed them from the back of the surviving Marines at an extremely fast speed. If this blow hits, this group of Marine freshmen will be directly dressed as candied haws. Observation Hockey noticed the insidious attack of Zephyr's pupils shrinking, and his tall and burly figure flashed quickly, appearing behind the group of Marine freshmen who could not cope with what happened. But it was too late to make precise defenses with Armament Hockey. Whoosh! The thread is almost invisible, the breath is extremely secretive, and the thin and sharp to the ultimate thread brings a string of blood beads, and penetrates through Zephyr's right shoulder. Just as it was about to pierce the newborn heart of Marina head like Lion Majesty, it was pinched by Zephyr's pitch-black palm. Hume. Doflamingo's arrogant laughter sounded from the highest point of the warship. Wearing a pink feather coat, he stood at the highest point, looking down at the people on the deck and Zephyr. Sure enough, Zephyr, emotionally, this is your weakness. He raised his hands and connected all the silk threads on the entire deck. Whip. Countless threads crisscrossed towards Zephyr and the new Marines he was protecting. It is not difficult for Zephyr to defeat this move, but it is difficult to completely protect everyone. Zephyr gritted his teeth and slammed his right arm, directly breaking the bloody thread that had penetrated his right shoulder. Then, raising the pitch-black fist, he slammed heavily on the lower deck. The deck collapsed instantly. All the shocked marine students such as Yin fell. Those silk threads could not be stretched straight because they had no focus, forming a situation of siege and cutting. As expected of Admiral, Doflamingo squinted his eyes. Zephyr stepped on his feet, shaped like a cannonball, and rushed towards him. His injured right arm clenched his fist, the airwave entangled, and his fist was amazing. Line waves. Doflamingo caused all the silk threads scattered on this warship to flow here, like white waves, winding towards the rushing Zephyr. Zephyr's fist was wrapped in a soft silk thread, tightly entangled. But the power of his punch is still amazing. Directly defeat the cobweb used by Doflamingo for defense, penetrating through his abdomen. Cough. Doflamingo opened his mouth and let out a mouthful of blood, but he looked at Zephyr in front of him with a crazy smile on his face. Hey, it's almost. Strings of silk thread were tangled along his wound towards Zephyr's arm and body. Zephyr just wanted to shake it away. Suddenly his right arm was numb. The energy is completely unable to show up. He frowned. Did you finally find it? Doflamingo laughed wildly. It's too late. A sharp line ran directly across Zephyr Armament Hockey's dissipated right arm. Moment. A lot of blood spewed out from the fracture. Zephyr gritted his teeth and stared at Doflamingo, who was pierced by his right arm in front of him. Doflamingo, what did you do? Doflamingo, with Zephyr's right arm still in his abdomen, smiled arrogantly. I said long ago, the protection of students is your weakness, Zephyr. The bloodline that pierced your shoulder, I added some poison. Zephyr's eyes shrunk slightly. Hey, he can last for so long after hitting that one. It's worthy of being Black Arm Admiral. He has amazing physique. While talking, Doflamingo reached out and pulled out Zephyr's right arm that was stuck in his abdomen. I saw his pierced body, thousands of thin threads quickly entangled, repairing the internal organs. Zephyr saw this scene, his pupils shrank, ignoring the wound on his right arm. Armament Hockey's hardened left hand clenched his fist and slammed it down towards Doflamingo. Line wave cobweb. Doflamingo blocked this heavy punch with an enhanced spider web, but he was still knocked into the air. Just when Zephyr jumped up again, he was about to give another heavy blow. In midair, Doflamingo's hand was connected to the clouds in the sky with a thread, and his figure flew into the sky quickly under the traction of that thread. It's a worthwhile trip to see the strength of an admiral and get an admiral's arm. That's it for today, and those guys will leave it to Zephyr. Zephyr, who used moonwalk but still didn't catch up, roared. Doflamingo, Heavenly Yaksha. Doflamingo's sullen laughter resounded through the clouds in the sky. But his figure has disappeared. The warship was silent, damaged, and messy. The deck was covered with blood and stumps everywhere. More than 60 marine freshmen, 11 people who died in the hands of Doflamingo, 17 people who died of cannibalism under his control. Ms. Zephyr, your arm. Bins and others stood in front of the corpses of their dead companions, looking at Zephyr, who was slowly walking back after losing one of his arms, with tears on his face and tears. The malice came too suddenly, and the life that was still around and chatting with him freshly just disappeared in a blink of an eye. Zephyr walked up to the dead students and knelt down, tears streaming out of his eyes. At this time, thunder was rolling in the sky where the dark clouds gathered, and the heavy rain poured down. Ron stood in the corner with Reikiri in his arms and looked at them. His half-length, ear-length black hair was soaked in the rain and fell on his face. Under the black bangs, his eyes were calm as water. For himself, he couldn't empathize with Zephyr's pain at this time. What he is thinking in his heart now is, the original plot should be that Edward Wabel, who has not yet become one of the 7 warlords of the sea, cut off Zephyr's arm and killed all the marine freshmen except Bins, but now it turned out to be the work of Doflamingo. Sure enough, because of his own appearance, has it changed the original plot. The day after the incident. Marine Headquarters. Marineford, what did you say? The warship Zephyr took the freshmen to practice was attacked by Heavenly Yaksha Doflamingo. Sengoku was shocked. Yes, I don't know the specifics yet, but Doflamingo killed more than 20 marine freshmen and also broke Zephyr Admiral's right and right arms. Sengoku's eyes suddenly shrank, and his fists on the table slowly clenched. Isn't it enough to be 7 warlords of the sea? Doflamingo. He raised his eyes to look at the general. Zephyr, where are they now? Still on the way back to Marineford, it is estimated that there will be 3 days to return to Marineford. Go and inform, call me all the Admiral and Vice Admiral in Marineford here. Sengoku said solemnly. Yes, 1 day after this incident. This night, Zephyr, without an arm, found Ron who was swinging a knife on the deck. Ron stopped swinging his knife and turned to look at him. Zephyr Admiral, don't you need to rest and recuperate? It's nothing more than a broken arm. Zephyr said, holding a bottle of wine in his left hand and raising him. I heard Garp say you drink well, come and have a drink with me. Under the night, 2 people, one big and one small, one old and one young, sat on the deck of the damaged warship. It was the old man who asked Kizaru to go to Sengoku to say that you came to the old man's boat to participate in this internship. Zephyr held the bottle, and while talking, poured wine into the saucer in front of Ron. The old man intended to show you the evil side of the pirates so that you could make up your mind to join Marine, but he didn't expect to involve you in such a danger. Sorry. Ron didn't speak, just took the wine dish in front of him and drank it in one gulp. Zephyr glanced at him, then picked up the wine saucer and looked up and drank. After drinking, Ron put down the empty wine saucer and looked at Zephyr who was sitting across from him. What are you going to do next? The old man will never forgive Doflamingo for doing this kind of thing. When I return to Marineford this time, the old man will ask Sengoku to let me lead an army to arrest him. Zephyr's voice is low and full of anger. Ron shook his head when he heard the words. I don't think Marshal Sengoku will promise you. Zephyr frowned. How is it possible? Although Sengoku is stubborn, he has never been soft in dealing with pirates. Doflamingo committed such a big crime, even 7 warlords of the sea. Doflamingo is no ordinary pirate. Ron shook his head and interrupted Zephyr, looking directly at Zephyr. In addition to 7 warlords of the sea, he has another hidden identity. Because of this identity, first don't think Marine will do anything to him. Boy Ron. Zephyr stared at Ron with a solemn expression. Marine is a bit incompetent, but he is definitely upholding justice. The old man absolutely does not believe that Marine will turn a blind eye to such serious crimes for what he has done. Then wait and see. Ron didn't want to argue with Zephyr more on this issue. Whoever missed a period of time would know. The next period of time. Both of them were silent while drinking. At night, the wind on the sea gently blows, accompanied by the sound of the flowing sea. It is particularly quiet. Zephyr broke the silence first. In Marineford's headquarters, Vice Admiral Mole's swordsmanship has reached the level of swordsmanship. I have already told him. For the sake of my face, he will help you. You can go to him when you return to Marineford. Pair training will be of great help to your swordsmanship improvement. Your shave, moonwalk and tempest kick are already masters. I have nothing to teach you. I can only tell you one thing. These are all physiques developed on the basis of basic physique. The most important thing is to improve these tactics. Zephyr drank and said, as if he was going to get drunk, and said everything he was holding in his heart in one breath. You didn't eat devil fruit. It seems to me a good thing. Too many people with fruit ability on the sea rely on their own fruit ability and ignore the foundation. No matter how strong such people are, they will inevitably have weaknesses. I can feel that your observation hockey has awakened. It is different from the practice of armament hockey. If you want to strengthen observation hockey, you have to push yourself to life and death more. The instinct of your body can be activated and observation hockey can achieve more high height. Zephyr used his drunken scent to express his thoughts about the strengthening of cultivation and his advice to Ron. Said for almost an hour. During the period Ron was just listening while drinking, with a hint of thought flashing in his eyes from time to time. After drinking, Zephyr also finished what he wanted to say. He staggered to his feet from the ground. Don't go to the Marine Academy in the future, it's just a waste of time for you now. If you want to become stronger, go and fight the strong and absorb their actual combat experience. Zephyr turned around and turned his back to Ron. After losing a right arm, the tall and burly figure looked a little heroic. Before leaving, he said one last word. As long as the justice you think in your heart does not change, no matter whether you join Marine or choose not to join, the old man will have no objection. Early the next morning, a yellow flash appeared on the sea, and then came to the warship in a flash, condensed into a tall and thin figure wearing a coat of justice. It is Naval Headquarters Vice Admiral, Kizaru Pelusalino. Hey, did you really take Teacher Zephyr away with one arm? That heavenly Yaksha Doflamingo is really terrifying. Kizaru put his hands in the pants kabuto and said while looking at Zephyr ahead. The tone is still that annoying. The Marine freshmen who made Ayan and other survivors couldn't help gritting their teeth, clenching their fists, and staring at him angrily. What are you doing here, Kizaru? Zephyr looked at Kizaru and asked. The marshal asked me to escort Teacher Zephyr back safely. Kizaru looked at his right hand, and teased Zephyr in his usual annoyingly slow tone. The dignified Marine admiral being attacked by a pirate is already considered a disgrace to Marine. If anything goes wrong with the admiral in our Marine headquarters, Marine's prestige will really disappear. Listening to what he said, Yin couldn't help it anymore, and said angrily. What do you know? Teacher Zephyr is for us. Ayan. Zephyr stopped her aloud. But the teacher. No need to say more. Zephyr looked at Kizaru. Porosalino, so do you. Yes, Teacher Zephyr. Kizaru walked past him, turning his head and looking around under the gaze of those Marine freshmen. Speaking of which, this is really terrible enough. Oh, the specially recruited intern is still alive. It seems that the situation here is better than I thought. He saw Ron standing in the corner holding Reikiri. Ron looked at Kizaru in front of him. Logia sparkling fruit-capable person. One of the future Marine 3 Admiral. The top combat power on the sea. Although he is still Vice Admiral, his strength is definitely above Zephyr. Ron still has a long way to go before he becomes such a strong player. Kizaru looked at Ron's gaze, his eyes under the sunglasses narrowed slightly. Yeah. What an incredible kid. Under Kizaru's escort, the warship returned to Marineford without incident. Zephyr and Ayn were both called. Ron, who was a special intern, was fine. He returned to the residence alone. Lying in bed, Ron closed his eyes and sank into the system space, sorting out the gains from this trip. In addition to increasing a lot of vitality value. Fully master shaved, outside moonwalk and tempest kick. The biggest gain is that I felt an awakened observation hockey when fighting against Doflamingo. Although this process is unexpectedly dangerous. But for Ron, the result is not bad. The points that Zephyr said for my cultivation are also very rewarding. Ron opened his eyes and thought to himself. The direction of the next practice will almost be clear, and there is no need to take extra detours. After encountering a powerful enemy like Doflamingo this time, Ron once again felt his own shortcomings, and his desire to become stronger became stronger again. After all, there are no enemies waiting for you to grow up. Accidents and dangers always come suddenly. The basic physique is still in the middle. If I have the opportunity, I have to follow the warship to go outside. The chi value signed to the various islands can greatly accelerate the speed at which I become stronger. In terms of swordsmanship, I'm still in the early stages of Yijing, so I have to spend more time on it. Let's go look for that mole afterwards. The sun breathing method is also the basis for me to become stronger. With the true meaning of the permanent buff, I have reached 89% of the master degree of the sun breathing method. The next goal is to reach 100 master degree within 3 months. Ron had a hunch. When the master reaches 100%, he is likely to awaken another ability. Transparent world. When Ron was planning to become stronger. Zephyr is also applying with Sengoku to lead troops to defeat Doflamingo to avenge the dead Marine recruits. At this time, Sengoku's reply to him was, assault Marine Admiral and slaughter Marine recruits, even if he is 7 warlords of the sea. I, Sengoku, as Marine Marshal, will never tolerate such crimes. It's just that this matter is very important, and you need to consult the world government, Zephyr. You should go back and take a good rest. After I report to the world government, I will definitely give you a satisfactory answer. Zephyr went back, after he took Yin and others to finish the funeral and various subsidies of those Marine recruits, so as to comfort their families. It is already 5 days later. There is still no news from Sengoku. Zephyr couldn't sit still, so he went to the Marine headquarters building again and found Sengoku. Facing his question, Sengoku was silent for a long time. Sorry, Zephyr. Sorry. What do you mean sorry? We, Marine, cannot attack Doflamingo, nor hold him accountable, just treat it as it didn't happen. Listening to Sengoku's low voice, Zephyr's eyes shrank, and there was a faint pain at the broken arm, but these were not as painful as his heartache at this time. He clenched his fists, his bloodshot eyes widened, staring at Sengoku, who was standing behind the table. Sengoku, do you know what you are talking about? Sorry, but this is what the world government meant. Sengoku said in a low voice. Zephyr gritted his teeth angrily. Is it because of Doflamingo's other identity? What kind of identity does he have that allows the world government to protect him like this? Sengoku did not answer, but just looked at him and said, Zephyr, don't ask. Since the world government has already spoken about this matter, it's all about it. In the face of the government, neither you nor me. Then, what are my students who died? They are all young freshmen, Marine. Zephyr roared. Did they just die in vain? Sengoku clenched his fists and said nothing. Zephyr in the code of justice gritted his teeth, strode forward, came to Sengoku, grabbed his collar, and looked at him with great anger in his eyes. The criminal pirate who killed the innocent Marine won't be held accountable or punished because of his identity. Is this Marine still a Marine? Is there justice for such a Marine? Answer me, Sengoku. Zephyr. Sengoku was also a little annoyed. I know you are angry, and I am also angry, but Marine's justice is not something you can criticize. You should know the relationship between our Marine and the world government. This matter has been a foregone conclusion since the world government issued an order. The orders of the world government are more important to you than anything else. Sengoku. Zephyr slowly let go of his hand grasping Sengoku's collar, and slowly backed away. Is justice and fairness meaningless in front of the world government? World government is Kun's absolute justice in the world. Sengoku stared at Zephyr and said coldly. The order of the world government is absolute. For those who doubt the world government, Zephyr, even if it is you, I will not show mercy. Hee. Zephyr sneered at him. You are as stubborn as you were when you were young. The height of the marshal's position and your blind loyalty to the world government make you unable to see everything outside. Zephyr, you are wrong. It is because of this position that I can see more. Sengoku said solemnly. Zephyr stared at him coldly, and Sengoku didn't take a step back. The atmosphere is cold. He listened to the door for a long time. Vice Admiral sighed and stepped into the room. This is the end of this matter, Zephyr. Those recruits who have died, we will treat their families as martyrs. Family. Zephyr became more angry when he heard the word. Don't catch the sinners who killed them, just rely on those things to soothe their broken hearts. His family was killed by a pirate. Why are there more and more pirates in the sea? Why is the Revolutionary Army gradually growing? Marshal Sengoku, have you considered these? Sengoku narrowed his eyes and stared at Zephyr, his tone angrily. Zephyr, what do you want to say? Once the anger in a person's heart burns, if it is not released, it cannot be suppressed no matter how much it is suppressed. Zephyr turned and walked outside the door. One day, this anger will eventually burn to the world government. Zephyr, shut up. Sengoku completely lost his temper. Zephyr paused when he walked out of the door, and turned his back to Sengoku and Crane Vice Admiral to take off the justice coat draped over his shoulders. Following the coat of justice slowly fell. Zephyr's cold voice rang in Sengoku's ears. There is no justice or fairness in Marine now. From today, I will resign from all positions. I am no longer a faculty at Marine Academy, nor is it Admiral, the headquarters of Marine. The resignation of Zephyr from all his posts soon spread throughout Marineford and sparked heated discussions. Ron, who had almost guessed the situation beforehand, was not too surprised when he heard it. It was almost as he expected. This day, Naval Headquarters Vice Admiral, after completing a patrol mission, the mole met Ron with Reikiri on his back on the road. You are the mole Vice Admiral. Ron looked at the mole with Moxie's dried head in front of him and said. I'm Ron, I know you. Wearing a dark blue striped suit with a long knife on his waist, Mole looked at him and nodded. Ms. Zephyr told me, you came to me to practice swordsmanship, right? Ron nodded. He glanced at Reikiri behind Ron and thought for a while and said, I still have something to do for the time being. At 9 o'clock tonight, you go to the number 4 harbor, and I will be there waiting for you. 9 p.m. Ron came to Port 4 where there were not many people. The mole is already here. After seeing him, Mole dropped the ordinary smoke in his hand, stepped on it with his foot, and said to him, say well in advance, I can only practice with you for half an hour at most. Good. Ron slowly pulled out rapier behind him. Come on, let me try your strength. Mole also drew the long knife from his waist, and a powerful sword that belonged to the swordsman radiated from him. Feel the oppression. Ron squinted his eyes, and the sword intent was released without reservation. A flash of surprise flashed in Mole's eyes. Ron accurately grasped this moment, shaving directly, and came to him. Moon's breath. 3 types of disgusting moon ablation. A series of moon-shaped blade winds slashed at the mole with a single-handed knife at a very tricky and strange angle. Ron didn't keep his hands on the first move. He completely regarded the mole as an enemy, and launched an attack on the opposite side with killing intent. What a sly killer sword. A flash of surprise flashed across Mole's heart. Although surprised, it is not difficult for him, who possesses good observation hockey and Johnau's strength, to deal with it. Swing the knife and fall. Ron didn't even see the slash. The moon-shaped blade wind that hit the mole was instantly cut away. Moment. Ron, who played observation hockey, felt a danger. His eyes condensed slightly, his figure turned without hesitation, and rapier made a perfect arc in his hand. Moon's breath. 5-shaped moon soul calamity vortex. Defensive sword moves. A huge Uzumaki blade wind appeared around Ron, colliding with a slash that suddenly appeared in front of him, making a sharp sound of sharp weapons rubbing against each other. Hey! From the confrontation and collision of the 2 slashes, the sharp winds spilled out to the surroundings. The mole became more surprised. This kid was able to block his slash, although it was just a casual slash, but after all, it was a slash from a sword tyrant who reached the realm of iron slashing, and a swordsman in a realm of ordinary swordsmanship would definitely not be able to deal with this easy. And he even awakened observation hockey. He seems to be 11 years old, right? What a monster. Regardless of his shock. Moon's breath. 6-shaped long night lonely moon infinite. Ron carried rapier in both hands, and concentrated on staggering the mole in a quick and continuous chop. In an instant, more than a dozen sharp blade winds slashed towards the mole with countless moon blades. Mole narrowed his eyes, held a knife in both hands, and slashed forward with his knife. A strong and domineering slash engulfed the incomparable blade wind, breaking through these blade winds and moon blades instantly, and slashed towards Ron. What? Ron's eyes were startled, and he immediately blocked it with a knife. However, he was forced to slide more than 10 meters backward by the violent slash. When Ron looked up again, the mole has taken away his sword and returned it to its sheath. Your aura and killing intent are very good. This kind of sly killing sword move is considered to be the top one I have seen so far, and your master's is also very good, but... Mole glanced at Ron. If you rely on such a sword technique, you will not be able to reach the state of cutting iron. Ron's eyes widened slightly. Mole turned his back to him and lit a cigarette. I don't know if anyone has told you that in order to reach the state of cutting iron, the heart needs to be strong enough to hold a wooden stick, and have the courage and confidence to cut steel. And if you want to have this kind of confidence and courage, you can't rely on your master's sword moves. Those sword moves will only make you blind. Mole turned his back to Ron and spit out the smoke ring. Ron thoughtfully. Then what should I do? The mole with Mohegan's head turned and glanced at him. From tomorrow, abandon those sword moves. He left after speaking, only to leave a sentence. Tomorrow at 9 o'clock, still here. The next night. Ron arrived early. After the mole came, the two of them didn't talk nonsense and started fighting immediately. Ron forcibly resisted the desire to use his sword, and just slashed with his sword. This time, he was taught a miserable lesson by the mole. After the fight, Mole asked how he felt when he was lying in a big pit, almost unable to move. After I learn it, I will definitely let you feel it. Ron stared at the flying squirrel standing on the edge of the pit, gritted his teeth. The mole calmly spit out the smoke ring. That's right, accumulate this feeling well and continue tomorrow. The 3rd day, the 4th day, the 5th day. Such days lasted for a month. Under the condition that he couldn't use any sword moves and other methods, he faced a sword tyrant in the realm of slashing iron. Ron was beaten unilaterally. Fortunately, he can quickly recover his strength and repair the wounds with the breathing method of the day, otherwise it is difficult to say whether he can hold it. After each trial, Ron seemed to have a suffocated anger in his chest. There was nowhere to vent his breath, so he kept accumulating more and more. In the next battle with Mole, Every time he slashed, he wanted to vent his accumulated anger in one breath, but every time it was almost a little bit, the flying squirrel stopped abruptly to say no to fight, making him abruptly suffocated. Went back. Under this constant suppression, Ron's anger felt like a balloon was constantly being blown up, but it never burst. Motivated by the suppressed negative emotions of Pang Yamato in his heart, Ron seemed to go crazy, waving Reikiri time and time again no matter it was day or night. Every time he swung his sword, the face of the flying squirrel that made him so hot, and the hairstyle of the dry head of Moxie came to mind. I can't wait to cut it to pieces. Even if I don't use sword moves, I must hack that guy. Ron recalled the mocking words and expressions of flying squirrels in his mind, and a red light gradually appeared in the depths of his eyes. What he didn't notice was, during the month when he practiced slashing frantically and focused extremely on swordsmanship, the true meaning of the permanent buff has been activated most of the time. His swordsmanship realm has also unconsciously reached the Yi realm, Xiaocheng, from the Yi realm, first entry. Within this month, the news that the flying squirrel pointed Ron's swordsmanship also reached the ears of Marines executives. In the Marshal's office, only Marshal Sengoku and he Vice Admiral discussed this matter. Xiaohei, do you think this thing needs to be stopped? If the light is from my perspective, I will stop it. The gray-haired crane Vice Admiral sat on the chair and said calmly. Flying squirrels knowingly violated the military order and taught that kid swordsmanship. They should be punished as they should be, but... She sighed lightly. If you think about Zephyr, I think this thing can be ignored. Just treat him as some compensation, Sengoku. Sengoku was silent for a moment, then nodded. Soon, more than a month passed. This night, Naval Headquarters Vice Admiral Gion, nicknamed Momoshige, returned from a mission that had been lurking outside for 2 years. Several generals from the Marine Academy, under the advice and arrangement of T. Dolphin, set up a reception banquet for her and had a small gathering together. The flying squirrel was also pulled over by his friend Huo Xiaoshan. I heard that flying squirrels have been teaching that specially recruited intern Little Ghost swordsmanship every night. Drunk, Vice Admiral, the headquarters of the nicknamed T. Dolphin, tried to get to the front of the flying squirrel. Is it? Momoshige came interested and looked at the flying squirrel. Looking at Momoshige's drunken and blushing beautiful face, the flying squirrel was a little hard to look straight, glanced at his face and nodded. Okay, hey, is the specially recruited intern named Ron? I met Hina on the way back, and I heard Hina say that he is a very interesting kid. Momoshige asked, very interested in flying squirrels. Will you teach him tonight? Can I go and see? Well, what, just go and see, what's the big deal? The drunk man put his arm around the squirrel's shoulder. It's rare for Momoshige to come back. If you guy dares to refuse her, I will, vomit. The corner of the flying squirrel's eyes jumped. Hey, don't spit it out. Haha, plus this guy's drink volume is still as bad as ever. Huo Xiaoshan laughed. Stop talking cold words, quickly pull him away from me. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.